Liana, a powerful witch with fire and ice magic, is called the continent's catastrophe for her plan to destroy the world. The witch, along with her 6 henchmen who always follow her, belongs to the 7 calamities of Runevelt, and she is their queen. Since childhood, Liana was a cruel witch who easily mastered all her current powers, and she felt no pity for her enemies. At the age of 15, the witch raised an entire empire that opposed her to the ground. The war began, and the calamities settled in Liana's heart. The witch knew no limits and kept increasing the number of her subordinates, sent to the lands, whom the terrified people called demons. Humanity was on the verge of extinction. Many were willing to submit to the witch so as not to fight more useless wars and bloody ones, but the darkness that surrounded them since the appearance of the bloodthirsty witch unexpectedly dissipated, illuminated by a bright light of hope. The people rejoiced, as that light was a hero who could save them from the oppression of the powerful witch. The hero was the Holy Father of Hesperia, a man who obeyed the will of the goddess Hesperia and fulfilled it. People saw him as a savior. The witch, on the other hand, saw the Holy Father as her worst enemy. Her face, upon seeing him, distorted into a grimace of disgust. She found him repulsive. Their war quickly escalated into a fierce battle between Holy Hesperia and the dark forces, a clash of diametrically opposed convictions and morals. The confrontation between these 2 factions lasted for 5 long years. Neither would yield. Both sides fought tooth and nail to maintain their territory. After Liana's death, the darkness agreed to a treaty with Holy Hesperia. The war ended in peace, and the following events take place 50 years later. The archbishop meticulously copies the chronicle with a violet, gold-tipped pen. On the old paper, the image of the Holy Father is glimpsed. A woman dressed in white enters the room, bows before the man, and lowers her head. She informs him of the Holy Father's request to gather all the goddess's servants. The archbishop's hand trembled over the sheet of paper, gripping the pen tighter, revealing the tension that the newcomer's words had caused in Bachman. With an expression of sorrow, he turns towards the woman. "Stop writing. The moment has arrived, and Bachman knows it perfectly well." All the goddess's servants gather around the Holy Father's deathbed, mourning his imminent passing and listening attentively to his last words before departing to another world. The Holy Father extends his hands upwards, speaking incoherently, interrupted with every breath, saying that the goddess Hesperia has not abandoned any of them. His hands rise higher and higher towards the fresco, depicting the appearance of the goddess Hesperia, who, according to him, will soon manifest before the saints in the form of a child. It thunders outside. The Holy Father gives his last goodbye to the goddess's servants. He asks them to find the Holy Child as soon as possible, and leaves this world. Tears spring from the people crowded around him. They scream and sob, realizing that the hero of the continent is dying before their eyes. And they cannot help. The Holy Father's hands weaken and fall onto the bed. He exhales his last breaths and departs forever from the world of the living. His death demoralizes the people. The saints are in the street, discussing how they will look for the child. They worry that the calamity bearers might know, and decide not to announce the Holy Father's death. Bachman stands apart from the crowd, deep in thought. A raindrop unexpectedly falls on his face, forcing the archbishop to distract himself from his thoughts. In seconds, thousands follow that drop, and it starts pouring rain. The sky shares the human pain and sheds tears upon the earth in the form of rain. Suddenly, Bachman hears the loud crying of a child. He is very surprised. He locates where the sound is coming from. He runs out and heads quickly towards it. The source of the crying is deep in the forest, towards which the archbishop is heading, ignoring small obstacles like puddles and branches in the way. He runs out from behind another bush, and a faint divine light illuminates his face. Bachman decides to go forward and find its origin. The source of the light is at the edge of a fountain. The light near it becomes brighter, creating a magical feeling of the presence of something otherworldly. Bachman approaches and discovers a baby in a basket. That magical glow emanates from him/her. The archbishop is amazed by such a miracle. The baby in the basket cries loudly and calms down a little when seeing Bachman, who believes the child's appearance is the Holy Father's fulfilled prophecy. The archbishop sits next to the little girl, extends his hands towards her, shedding a tear of happiness, and calls the little saint. He, like other priests, eagerly awaited her arrival. The saint looks at him, as if understanding everything the archbishop says, and even stops crying, as if attentively listening to Bachman's words. But her mood changes very quickly. Her eyes fill with unjustified fury, directed at the archbishop. The little girl flies out of Bachman's arms, kicking him in the face, and uttering something unintelligible, which means an order for the archbishop to stay away from her. The saint, a man who can only belong to the incarnation of the goddess, must occupy an even higher position than that of the Holy Father. She must save the continent, using all the power she was given at birth, protect the people from various misfortunes, and save the populace from the witch Liana. But the saint, unexpectedly even to herself, turns out to be the reincarnation of Liana, and she has no intention of saving anyone. She becomes enraged by the actions of the archbishop, who worships her. Purple eyes and beautiful blonde hair are characteristic only of the goddess, which is why Bamman confidently calls the child the saint. Maria is so happy that tears spring from her eyes, and George III believes that, with the saint, everyone on his continent and beyond has been blessed. The three gather around the saint, getting close enough to almost touch her, and thank her for her prompt visit. The little one looks at them with displeasure, astonished by their naivety and lack of vision. They will never understand who she really is. It infuriates her how terribly wrong everything happening to her now is. She shouldn't have ended up in this body. Liana remembers all the lives she has had to live. She has been in the body of an imperial princess, in that of a will-less slave. She even got to be an earthly animal like a deer, a cat or a bird, and even a fish. Liana has reincarnated many times in the bodies of various beings. The girl is so fed up with this vicious cycle of life and death that she decided to try to destroy the world to stop this endless cycle. Despair invades Liana over her new rebirth, as she has already lived over 100 lives. But she failed to avoid another reincarnation. The little one breaks down crying, releasing all her pent-up emotions and creating a radiance around her thanks to divine power. Something Bachman observes with amazement. Liana pays attention to him, remembers her previous encounter with Bachman, and mentally notes that she is actually an atheist and does not believe in the goddess. She had already faced the archbishop during the battle against the saints, but she was much younger then, and people called him Sacred Shield, not Bamman. The man had aged a lot since then. His face became covered in wrinkles. He grew a beard and lost all the hair on his head. The girl's eyes open in surprise as she tries to calculate how many years have passed since her previous reincarnation. And she remembers her friends. Liana has no idea where they are now, how they are doing, how the war ended. What happened to all her acquaintances? She knows absolutely nothing. Sister Maria suddenly carefully lays the little one on her back, which causes her great confusion. She smiles kindly and informs the saint that she is going to change her diaper. And without further ado, she gets to work. Liana freezes, but that doesn't save her from the diaper change. And, amidst her screams, demanding that the human rights violation attempt stop, they change her diaper. This throws the girl into a rage. She clenches her fists tightly and closes her eyes to stop the torrent of hysterical tears. She loses her temper, swears to regain her powerful strength, and kill everyone involved in the misunderstanding that just occurred. After drinking milk, the saint fell asleep in Maria's arms, who suggested to Bachman and Jurg not to tell the people about the saint's birth so as not to cause unnecessary commotion. The archbishop agrees, but warns that the saint needs protection, as dark forces remain latent, and he ponders it. But George interrupts him, asking Bachman to concentrate on his work, assuring him that he and Maria will protect the girl. The saint will be safe. He was about to add something else, but a creak from the imposing main door interrupts him. George and Bachman turn in unison, observing the newcomer with analytical gazes. He arrived just in time. Standing in the huge entrance is a boy, George IV, who physically resembles his father greatly, but his face reveals a different mind. George is smart and talented. Paladin blood runs in his veins, but Bachman believes he is still too young. George III asks his son to introduce himself to Bachman and Maria, trying to show good manners. The boy only bows silently to his father's request, and the father excuses him, because young George is still unsociable. George IV clenches his fists, reflecting on his arrival and his father's words, and concludes that his father is lying. He was tasked with protecting the saint, a task he finds boring and tedious. He longs to control his own destiny. He only sees the saint as a baby and believes she doesn't need protection, nor that he should be concerned with it. The boy recalls his father's words about watching the girl. That infuriates him. He wants to be independent and leave that house. Meanwhile, in the Dark Forces lair, playing chess, They discuss the fulfilled prophecy and the return of the saint. The green-haired girl, moving the queen with magic, says she waited a long time for the Holy Father to disappear and end up in a coffin. The man she is playing with scolds her for those thoughts and reminds her of the wisdom of the seed that grows into a tree, and it is a problem if it is not cut down. He shows her the meaning of that wisdom with a chess piece that, with magic, he shatters into pieces. She agrees but keeps grumbling. There is no turning back now. The Holy Father died, and his final prophecy was fulfilled. The saint has been born. Her words are interrupted by an insolent laugh. The girl's eyes light up, and she turns furiously towards Jack. The source of the laughter, he has no right to laugh at her. Jack asks her to think, and says he sees the future with too much sadness. They are strong enough to deal with the Holy Father's prophecy. Mentioning the Queen's death completely throws Jack into a rage. His eye starts twitching. The veins in his face swell with tension. She screams at him. He shouldn't have touched that sensitive nerve, and attacks him with her magic. Jack, to defend himself and counterattack, also uses his powers. The man on the throne, who observed the fight in silence, orders his companions to stop. This argument is pointless. They should worry about protecting this place until the Queen returns. So he orders Jack to destroy the appeared saint. Jack was already thinking about doing it, and if necessary, he will do it right now. He passes by the girl who looks at him with disgust. Jack promises he will be discreet. He says goodbye, asking Chrome, the man who gave him the order to take care of the Queen, and this place. The orphan begs the mage to train her. He sees no point, as she hasn't improved at all, but she insists. So he asks why she wants to learn magic. The girl replies that she has a wish that only magic can fulfill. The man observes her silently, without answering, but he decides to take her as his apprentice. He asks for her name. The little girl has no name. The man is surprised and encouragingly places a hand on her back. The man tells the girl that from now on her name is Liana, a name that means bright light. Liana wakes up with tears in her eyes, because her former teacher and mentor appears to her frequently in dreams, and they always disturb her. It wasn't easy for Liana to master even the most basic magical skills from the beginning. Perhaps, if her teacher hadn't lent her a hand in time, she wouldn't have become the Archmage of Runnebolt. The man helped her learn the most elementary magical techniques, helped her adapt to the world, and became someone close. He showed her what happiness was. He gave her a home. He gave her a name with a beautiful meaning, and filled her with wonderful memories. They didn't live together long, but every second the girl spent with the old man warmed her heart. She celebrated her first achievements in magic with him. She wanted to reach new goals for him. That man gifted her a happy life with ease. And with the same ease, he took it away. He took away her happiness. He forced her to lose her home and turned her into a cruel person. He was the one who created the powerful witch, the threat to the continent. He transformed Liana into the person she is now. This man also created the forbidden magic that Liana now longs to find. The young woman remembers him and prepares to start the search for her treasure tomorrow. She will search the entire palace. The goddess's servants are worried. They pray to the saint, sent by the goddess, for protection against evils. They pray for the messenger from Runnebolt who appeared in the morning, who dared to chop wood with his chest bare, and scared everyone. And after chopping wood, he had the audacity to harass the servants distributing food, disturbing them and hindering their work. The servants must confess to the goddess every night so that people like this do not reappear or cause them trouble. Little Jorg, who was passing by, overheard this conversation and became deeply thoughtful. Looking at the frightened saints, suddenly his father called him, pulling the boy out of his reverie and asked him to follow him and not lag behind. Jorg ran after his father, realizing that the saint's decision to report the Holy Father's death was foolish. Now many suspicious types are lurking around Asperia. George III suddenly stops in front of the entrance to the saint's bedroom, and this confuses his son. Turning to look at his father, the boy saw tears on his face and was amazed, because he had always thought his father incapable of crying. In reality, they were tears of happiness, because the goddess had not yet abandoned his family. Despite the George ancestors having betrayed the saints, the father addresses his son, begging him not to shame him before the goddess, who was able to forgive them despite the mistakes of their ancestors. The boy understood, but in his mind, he was amazed by his father's devotion. They enter the saint's room and find the crib empty, which terrifies them. The father bolts out, while George IV observes the room with astonishment. He puts his hand on the sword hilt, turns, and runs after his father. In one of the hallways of the building, he notices the saint on the floor moving quickly away from them. But the father doesn't see her and keeps running forward. Liana celebrates her successful escape. She plans how to enter the room, as the doorknobs are now too high for her. George IV shouts that he found the girl, and she, very surprised by his sudden appearance, starts crawling even faster. The boy catches up to the saint, grabs her by the collar, and calls her snot nose. This throws Liana into a rage, and she clenches her little fists tightly. George IV fails to dodge her accurate blow. The saint hits him in the face with all her strength. When George IV falls to the ground, Liana celebrates. Her fist hasn't rusted yet, and her strength remains intact. The boy recovers quickly from the blow. He gets up and forbids the little girl from crawling where she is going. But Liana pays no attention to him. George IV stands up. He extends his hands towards the saint and gently asks her to come closer, trying to warn her about something. But Liana focused on the boy's words about her not moving forward and interpreted it as the sign that she had chosen the right path. The little girl speeds up, advancing quickly in the forbidden direction, which greatly frightens George IV. Small clouds of dust rise under her feet. She is happy again for her successful escape. The little girl was never one to listen to anyone. Suddenly, she loses her balance, starts to fall, and realizes she is on a staircase. She begins to understand why the boy didn't want her to enter that part of the hallway. George IV runs after her. The saint screams. They both understand that if the girl falls, she will not only get injured, but probably die. The boy jumps after her. He flies down the staircase, extending his arms towards the girl. Several terrified goddesses' servants watch the rescue. George managed to catch the saint, but he, completely disconnecting his survival instincts, fell flat on his stomach. Those who were watching held their breath. Silence reigned. The girl is in George's arms, happy to be alive. The servants take her and see scratches on her knees. They order George to be tied up, which confuses the saint. The boy suffered even more than she did. George's father comes running, terrified to hear that his son injured the valuable saint in front of many witnesses. He admits his son's sin. He asks to be punished. Tears run down the face of the fourth George. Someone screams that the George family will be judged for this. The boy cries, lamenting his inexperience. The saint watches, helpless. No one would understand her words, and George would surely die. Suddenly, she hears a voice addressing the servants, asking them to listen to someone who saw everything from the beginning. The servants turn towards the speaker, an emissary from Runnebolt. The saint recognizes him by his voice. Jack, the lust mage of the 7 calamities of Runnebolt. Liana doesn't understand why he is here. The servants don't either, but they must listen to the emissary. Jack says that Georg saved the girl's life, and she scrutinizes his face, trying to guess what he is plotting. The servants fear him, avoiding contact. They don't understand why the envoy from Runnebolt is interfering. Jack smiles at the people and advances towards the tied-up boy, who, despite everything, will surely be killed. He extends his hand towards George IV in an inviting and calming gesture, bringing it close to the boy's face. Jack asks the servants to hand Georg over to him if they are going to kill him. Georg looks at him, visibly confused, but he soon understands the meaning of the envoy's words and opens his mouth wide. Speechless, the crowd and the boy's father are also astonished. The servant holding the saint hugs her tighter and asks Jack why they should give him the boy. Liana tries to find an advantage for Jack in his actions, but fails to understand why he does what he does. The girl recalls the features of Jack that she noticed in her previous life. Jack always considered love the supreme force. He often proposed strange battle strategies, based on turning everyone into prisoners of love. Liana was always astonished by his ideas. The girl understands that Jack has always been like this. He loved his love tricks, respected every form of love, and could make anyone fall in love. In reality, this man has not changed inside or out, which does not surprise Liana at all. While she reflects, Jack tries to convince the servants to hand over the boy to him, since it would mean nothing to them. In response to these statements, they begin to argue, to debate with Jack, proving him wrong, and refusing to yield. Jack, in response, smiles, takes an elegant step forward, and releases a cloud of pheromones. Using his power as the lust mage, the people around fall silent. Their tongues get tied, as if they were getting drunk. Their cheeks turn red. Jack bewitches them with his powers. Liana covers her nose with her hand, trying not to inhale the bright cloud, so as not to succumb to the effects of the envoy's spell. Jack hasn't recognized her yet, as he is busy carrying out some plan, and he doesn't expect to find his former queen as a baby among his enemies. Liana decides to draw the envoy's attention. She starts squealing in the servant's arms. The girl panics. Jack senses the commotion. He turns his head towards the saint and observes her with a chilling gaze. The servant lowers the girl to the ground. Jack assumes the little girl wants to approach. She must have fallen under his charms. The saint sighs tiredly and gets up. The goddess's servants gasp in surprise. Babies don't usually walk at that age. The little girl, staggering, stands on shaky legs. All eyes turn towards her. An astonished whisper runs through the place. She begins to take bold steps towards Jack, which greatly pleases the man, who feels very proud of himself. He crouches close to the ground, as the young lady surely came to meet him. He extends his arms towards the girl, smiling happily. Jack is greatly surprised when the saint walks past him, dodging him like a coiled snake. The little girl decisively approaches George IV, who is sitting on the ground, and plants herself in front of him. Looking at him with disdain, remembering how he blocked her path, the saint leans against his leg and carefully falls with her whole body onto George's knees, attracting everyone's attention. The goddess's servants and Jack watch her, amazed by what they see. They interpret it as a good sign. The saint was very tired and truly closed her eyes, preparing to sleep. She was trying to show the servants that George is a good person, and she succeeded. Jack meditates in silence, and after a few seconds his face changes. He smiles at the saint, trying to make Liana understand that he has recognized her. The young woman frowns while looking at him, trying to decipher if Jack has discovered her. But she doesn't reach a definitive conclusion. George was forgiven all his sins and the accusation of disobedience after the saint, of her own free will, sat on his knees. From that day, in the name of Father George III, George IV was named Knight of the Saint, something that deeply affected him later. They lay the saint down to sleep. She lies in a spacious room full of fresh air, in a small cradle, completely alone. It seems the little girl is asleep, but she suddenly opens her eyes, checking that everyone has left the room, and that the servants are not watching her. Convinced that everyone has gone to sleep, the saint carefully climbs out of the cradle and heads towards the room door, planning another brilliant escape. She remembers Jack's changed face. He surely recognized her, and this whole act of the young woman has a hidden purpose. The saint carefully moves a huge chair towards the door to reach the knob. She tries to do everything so that this time they don't catch her. The little girl reaches out her hand towards the door, but suddenly it opens by itself. The saint loses her balance and starts falling into the opening. She raises her hands, trying to protect herself, but she is already mentally preparing for the end of life number 101. Suddenly, Jack appears in the doorway and quickly catches Liana, preventing the girl from dying in such a stupid way. He examines the girl's face, calls her a naughty child, and then confirms Liana's suspicions. He has indeed recognized her. Liana tries to greet him, but only manages to utter incoherent sounds that bear no resemblance to human speech. The girl feels very frustrated by this, but at the same time very happy about Jack's appearance. She tries very hard to clearly ask Jack why he is there, but fails, and tries to say it again, failing once more. Out of frustration, the girl bursts into flames of rage and starts shouting loudly and, as always, incomprehensibly. At that moment, Jack snaps his fingers, creating a small cluster of bright yellow magic around him. The ability to speak clearly returns to the saint the instant she yells an obscenity, and those words come out of her mouth with complete clarity. By her own voice, the girl goes into shock. She opens her eyes wide and forgets to close her mouth. Jack confesses to having used spiritual powers. Controlling spirits is his forte. Jack plays with the spirits that appear and asks Liana if she is happy to see him. His way of speaking hasn't changed at all. Liana notices it, and Jack reminds her of her constant rudeness. Liana sees his arrival as an opportunity. In her new rebirth, she wanted to use her power, but now only divine energy emanates. Jack pities her difficult situation, but she ignores him and tries to find out how and why he came there. Chrome sent the emissary from Runnebolt to Hesperia to avenge his enemies by assassinating the saint. Now Liana is an enemy to her former companions, and that saddens her greatly. The girl clenches her fists, tense, while Jack is very surprised and asks if the heroine doesn't remember her past life. Liana thinks about it. She remembers all her past lives, but never their deaths, as if those memories were intentionally erased. For the first time, she realizes that all of this, including her rebirths and the erased memories of her deaths, is very strange. Suddenly, Jack drops to his knees and starts sobbing, causing the protagonist to shudder in surprise. She stares at him as he laments the injustice of life with Lion and grieves for his lost memories of the day of her death. Lion begs Jack not to cry and simply tell her everything as it was, because tears won't solve anything. Jack raises his sad gaze towards her. The spirit beside him is also afflicted. He, Jack, has to tell Lion about her death in the past life. On the last night before the battle in Holy Asperia, someone poisoned the girl right at the banquet. On the last night before leaving for battle, Lion gathered with the 7 sins, and together they toasted to victory. The young woman gave a loud toast, in which she convinced her companions of her absolute invincibility and their swift victory. After that, she gave a couple of motivating speeches and raised her cup above her head. These actions are the last things she can recall from her past life. After hearing Jack's story, the heroine is glad that at least after her death, her followers fulfilled her will, and she asks Jack where they are now. Jack looks at the girl with compassion. After the death of the disaster Archmage Queen, only 6 remained. About 50 years after her death, all the sins began to regret not being able to protect her back then, and wasting time. The saints offered a peace pact to the dark forces, but the sins believed they were involved in the queen's death and did not yield. At the last celebration with the queen, only 6 calamity mages attended. One of them was missing. The sins begin to suspect the only absentee at the ceremony, but he defends himself with tooth and nail. An absurd dispute erupts among the sins, where each accuses their allies of the queen's murder. Crom slams the table hard to stop the useless noise, succeeding instantly. Silence floods the room. He convinces his companions of the queen's imminent return and asks them to protect Runnebolt, fulfill their duties, and preserve the queen's body. Until her return, the sins cannot trust each other, so Crom asks that only those loyal to the queen remain. In the end, only 2 left, moving away down a desolate path, where no one else knew or heard anything of them. Beatrice, the sin of envy, heard that the first sin to leave disappeared. Crom looks at her and Jack questioningly. He didn't expect to see them there. Beatrice stays only for her dream of having a throne next to the queen's, and Jack stays for Crom, who will surely get bored waiting alone. Crom doesn't thank them. He just turns towards the setting sun. He believes his decision is correct. Little by little, the sins began to forget the saint's faults. But when the news of the saint's birth emerged, Crom sent Jack to kill her. But Jack quickly recognized in the saint the new reincarnation of Liana. Concluding his story, he smiled at the girl and asked her to go home with him. The saint refuses, as she has not yet found her master's forbidden magic. However, she likes the idea of leaving the temple under the power of Jack's spirits. Jack was perplexed by her refusal, placed a hand on her heart, and with sincere surprise asked, what was the reason for the girl's choice? Liana looked down at the floor. It became clear to Jack that the reason for the rejection is precisely the forbidden magic. He expressed this assumption out loud. The girl raised her head and looked Jack resolutely in the eyes. Her reincarnation in the saint's body is a golden opportunity to find treasures. Her entire past life was spent searching for the forbidden magic created by her master, and she doesn't plan to miss the opportunity to find it now. Jack thinks that in that case, she should return to Runnebolt, as there she can reunite all her people and start the fight against Hesperia. The throne of Runnebolt has been empty for a long time, and every time the queen's henchmen look at it, emptiness creeps into their hearts. He kneels before Liana and says that all the sins believed and waited a long time, and finally their prayers were heard. He takes the girl's hand in his and asks her to think about it a little more. Liana reflects that in Runnebolt, everyone is waiting for her like Jack and starts to doubt her decision. But she still decides that in moments like these, it is necessary to think with her head. She tells Jack that her enemies are not as simple as they seem. The sin's face instantly becomes serious. His hands drop. The girl does not want to offer senseless sacrifices and honestly confesses to Jack that the reason she is looking for forbidden magic concerns only her. She still cannot figure out exactly what is happening. She doesn't even know who is responsible for her death, so acting now is too risky. But the fact that in her other reincarnation, Liana has become a saint, she sees it as a great opportunity to find forbidden magic. Jack looks at Liana with understanding, smiles slightly at her, and tries to resign himself to the fact that the girl, apparently, will not change her mind. He picks up the saint in his arms and carries her to the cradle, accepting that she will be safe in the body of a little girl. As he lays her down, he tells her that he will not say a word about her in Runnebolt until she turns 5. Until then, she must be careful so that the saints do not know who she is. In the morning, Sister Maria notices that the saint is not in a good mood. She worries about her, as the saint must sleep well to be healthy. The girl squints due to the light and thinks about her nocturnal encounter. She decides that too much time has passed since her death. The young woman will age with time, like all saints. But Jack, who is already over 50, hasn't changed at all since their last meeting. Liana decides that, like Jack, none of her companions have aged. The blurry image of Chrome is the first thing that comes to her mind. Remembering him, she thinks that if Chrome finds out where she is, nothing will remain of the powerful Hesperia due to his insistence. Liana realizes how humiliating it was to die in the arms of her companions right before the battle. Chrome must be furious with her. At that very moment, Jack returns to Runnebolt. He loudly announces his arrival to Beatriz and greets her with a wave. A grimace of disgust appears on the girl's face. She drops the pen and crumples the sheet of paper she was writing on just a few seconds ago. Jack tells about his visit to Holy Hesperia. He calls the saint his favorite person. Beatriz understands and reprimands him. Jack notes Chrome's empty spot with surprise and asks Beatriz where he has gone. The girl stops screaming. She calms down and replies that Chrome left a short while ago with a bouquet of flowers. She assumes he went to see the queen, bringing her a couple of flowers from the vase, and she is right. Chrome kneels in front of the coffin where Leanne's body lies, preserved by the sins. Looking at the girl as if feeling nothing seeing her inert body, he asks when she will return. But he gets no answer. Leanne's dead body, in a coffin full of flowers, answers him with silence. Nothing reveals that she died from poison. It seems she is only sleeping. The battlefield is illuminated by the setting sun. Bodies and sword fragments cast shadows on the sand. Surrounded by emptiness that accentuates the atmosphere of doom, the majestic figures of Runnebolt's messengers rise above the sole survivor, their faces hidden in the shadow. Crum tells Lion that man, George II, the strongest paladin of the Empire, was sent by the Holy Father of Hesperia to destroy the emissaries of darkness. George II observes the emissaries of darkness, stops his gaze on Lion, and stares fixedly at the girl's cold eyes. Studying her, unexpectedly, the man opens his eyes wide and begins to confess his love to Lion, begging her to make him her slave. She stares at him stunned, unable to close her mouth from the shock and utter a word before the man's unexpected confession. Chromo, furious behind her, draws his sword. George II is screaming for a horrible death. Liana, understanding his intentions, is terrified and screams at Chromo to calm down. The saint sneezes in her cradle. Memories make her skin crawl, and her body starts to tremble. George III suddenly appears in front of the girl, frightening her greatly. He asks if she is cold, picks her up, and brings her close to his face, saying he will bring her a blanket. The saint screams and tries to move away. The man, distressed, asks his son why the saint doesn't like him approaching. George IV supposes his sudden appearance scared her, and Liana didn't expect to. In her new reincarnation, meet descendants of the sin of sloth. George II, a temple paladin, was the sin of sloth. He betrayed the saints and joined a powerful witch. Now he has two descendants of that man before him, his nephew and his son. The nephew looks a lot like his ancestor, but George IV does not. Suddenly, the saint hears a voice asking her if she has waited long. She opens her eyes wide and stops screaming. Sister Mary enters the room, holding a soft bundle. She brought a warm blanket for the little girl. Tears spring into the saint's eyes. She is genuinely happy about Mary's arrival. She has waited so long for her. Mary hugs the little one. The saint admires the woman's sweet voice and tender hands. She mentally thanks herself for being able to breathe freely. Suddenly, the goddess's servant appears at the door and asks Mary if she has the saint. Mary asks what is happening. The servant replies that Mr. Bachman has requested an audience, and the saint must go meet him right now. George IV asks Mary, when did Bachman become a lord? If he was an archbishop a short while ago. Mary replies that he will soon be the new Holy Father. She reminds him that it was Bachman who found the saint, and now he will receive the highest ecclesiastical rank. This will allow him not to bow to anyone. Mary, with the saint in her arms and accompanied by George, enters Bachman's office. Lena thinks that no one can be more influential than the goddess's incarnation. Bachman asks Mary and George to leave him alone with the saint. He says he has something to tell her and takes the girl from Mary's arms. Bachman says the conversation won't take long, and the saint is surprised to realize she is going to talk to a little girl who shouldn't understand anything at her age. She clings to this idea and decides that Bachman knows who she really is. But the ex-archbishop interrupts her with a story. Bachman tells her about the first Holy Father, who built this temple and left a fresco of the goddess inside it. This fresco shows the goddess's human form. It is the last message the saints could receive from her through the Holy Father. The little girl observes the image with fascination, listens to the man's words, but its meaning does not immediately reach her. Bachman bows his head, his face hidden in the shadows, and with sadness in his voice tells the saint that no other saint has received such signs from the goddess. The little girl is very surprised. She finally understands the meaning of Bachman's words. She understands that all the prophecies of the previous Holy Father were lies. The saint thinks that the Holy Father has been an impostor all this time, and that the Temple of Hesperia has been lying to people for over 500 years, preaching holiness. Despite all this, the goddess has not yet abandoned her servants. She has sent a second revelation in the form of a holy girl, her incarnation. He brings the saint closer to the statue, representing the face of the former Holy Father, and says that it was he who predicted her birth. The stone statue, representing this great man, silently looks at the newly arrived girl, with its head proudly raised. Liana, observing the statue, notices the amusing irony. Her memories of that person are not pleasant from her previous life. Bachman tells the little girl that this and other truths are passed down from generation to generation by the saints through the chronicles, and now that role is hers. He recounts the prophecy of the end of the world, left by the goddess 500 years ago, and about the archmage Hesperia, whose goal was to obtain forbidden magic. The witch was defeated, but even after her death, followers remained who do not cease in their attempt to find forbidden magic. He thanks the saint for her appearance, saying that, without exaggeration, she is the last hope for the saints, a sign that the goddess has not abandoned them. The little girl lowers her gaze to the floor, reflecting on the meaning of the new Holy Father's words. And inside, she disagrees with him. Bachman and the other goddess's servants see the saint as their last hope. They believe in her and long for her salvation, but they don't even suspect that the saint is actually a calamity that will destroy all their dreams. Hopes in this world. These thoughts amuse Liana, and she laughs softly, enjoying how simple everything is for her. Liana believes that this goddess does not really exist, and if she exists, she made a huge mistake by allowing Liana to be reborn in this girl's body. The girl, waiting for Bachman to finish his speeches, decided to ask him where the forbidden magic was, trying to tell him she wanted to see it. Suddenly, Bachman's expression changed drastically. A dark shadow fell over his face, his eyes staring fixedly into the void. Noticing the change in his behavior, the girl remembered Jack's warning. If the priests found out who she really was, they wouldn't let her go so easily. Her face broke out in a sweat. She glanced sideways at the new Holy Father with apprehension, fearfully awaiting what would happen next. The man's face tensed, his hands trembled, followed by his whole body. He opened his eyes wide and seemed lost in deep thought. The little girl began to think about what would happen to her if Bachman had managed to understand who she was. Despite his apparent lack of cunning for such deductions, unexpectedly, the man suddenly stood up and ran to the main door, carefully holding the little one in his arms. He opens the door with a bang and shouts for Sister Mary to inform her that the saint has been doing some little things. Liana opens her eyes and mouth wide, silently amazed by the Holy Father's lack of insight. Observing the commotion starting around her, Bachman hands the saint over to Mary, who notices the girl's unnatural paleness and starts hurriedly looking for a place to change her diaper. Bachman moves a little away and sighs in relief. Good thing he doesn't have to change the girl's diaper. The man tenses his arms, grips the column tightly, and a bright light emanates from his hands. The veins in his face swell. The man grits his teeth and lifts the huge column with effort. Mary watches as if nothing is happening, as if she had seen it before, and smilingly tells Saint to look at her new stone bed. Bachman is glad he got away with it. Mary thanks him and assures Saint that she will change her diaper right away. Liana frowns. Those muscles shouldn't scare her. She managed to possess much greater powers, but she decides she will try to ask the saints about the forbidden magic again. When she can speak clearly, she just has to wait. Next, we see what happens in the same place. But 5 years later, Bachman helps a simple servant load heavy sacks, and the latter thanks him heartily. It costs the Holy Father nothing, and he loves helping ordinary people with their daily chores. The goddess's servants observing them comment on Bachman's abundant hair. which grew back after a mysterious blessing. A servant asks what kind of blessing that is, and the girl in front of him is about to answer when the saint runs past her. The little girl, in a pompous light pink dress, illuminated by the bright morning sun, runs shouting the Holy Father's name. The man answers her call. A happy smile appears on his face when he sees the girl. The saint runs directly towards him. Her dress and abundant blonde hair ripple in the wind due to her rapid run. When close enough, the saint jumps and tries to hit Bachman, but he raises his hands in time to defend himself. The girl screams that Bachman should have taken her, and the man just smiles foolishly and thanks the saint for deciding to honor him with her presence. Suddenly, they both hear a female scream, faintly reaching from deep within the building, and begs the saint to come back. The little girl turns around and runs towards the voice, announcing to everyone that she is leaving. The servants comment that the saint is very energetic, as always. Now the little saint is 5 years old, and during those 5 years, she has tried to find out where Bachman keeps the forbidden magic. But every time the girl receives the same answer, Bachman says he will tell her about that magic when she is old enough. Liana understands that the man won't tell her anything until she comes of age and decides to figure everything out on her own. The saint runs towards the voice she heard during the conversation with Bachman and discovers that it is Sister Mary looking for her to prepare her for lunch. The girl hides behind the columns and laughs, realizing the power she is beginning to have over all these people. Despite her young age, she is also glad to have finally learned to easily connect with the divine power she received during her rebirth. Although the girl doesn't really like that the first manifestation of her power was curing Bachman of alopecia, a disease that causes total baldness in some areas of the body. She decides that today she will find out the truth when she suddenly hears a strange voice in the darkness that, without any emotion, announces that it has finally found the saint. The little girl observes this man and notices his unusual energy. The man's face is completely hidden under a hood. From his belt, he unexpectedly pulls out a sharp knife. The man is clearly going to do something bad, while proclaiming praise for Runnebolt. The knife's glint reflects in the saint's eyes. She carefully watches the man's movements, and when he screams demanding that she die already, the little girl moves. She jumps high, kicks the man in the stomach, and demands he repeat what he just said. The assassin doubles over, saliva gushes from his mouth, shocked by the strength of that little girl, wondering how a simple infant possesses such power. Memories of Chrome's words flood his mind, begging him not to underestimate the girl just because she is a child. The man's hood falls off. He lies on his back on the cold floor, unable to recover from the impact. The little girl places a foot on his chest, dominating him, casting a shadow over his face. She calls him Grandpa with disdain and forces him to look at her. She declares that, since the man is about to die, he should at least satisfy her curiosity before expiring. The man becomes enraged at the saint, who thinks he will reveal information so easily, and he searches for poison to commit suicide among his clothes. The little girl anticipates him and pulls out the poison capsule she found in his clothes and managed to extract during the attack. She tells him that he shouldn't give up his life, even in the face of immense danger. Using her divine powers, she destroys the poison capsule and declares that she will not allow him to die so easily. The saint smiles sinisterly, rises over the man, and with an icy voice orders him to answer her questions. The man lies unconscious. Liana gets frustrated seeing that he knows nothing and calls him useless. The saint finds a knife and thinks that Jack was right about the assassins who would come to the temple. If they come one by one, they don't know who she really is. In the knife's reflection, she sees her past life. Liana doesn't mind more assassins coming, but erasing traces, memories, and hiding weapons without information. She doesn't like it. She wanted to know about her friends, but decides not to worry, as they are magically immortal, and they do not die of old age. George IV appears before the saint, happy to find her, and tells her about Mary, his sister, who is relentlessly looking for her. The saint points to the man on the floor. She says he fainted and regrets being seen near a corpse again. Mary praises the saint for finding the body in time and notes that it's not the first time. The little girl just blushes. She sighs and rejoices silently. The goddess's servants are unobservant, and that benefits the saint. George IV prevents her from searching for magic well, and if the saints learn about the assassins, they will surely reinforce security. Mary approaches the saint and strokes her, wishing her good night. She even likes this carefree atmosphere. Mary quietly leaves the saint's room when she falls asleep and closes the door, pausing for a second in front of it. Mary's sister's face is in shadow, her lips pressed into a thin line. Silently, she darts out and leaves, trying not to make noise. In a lit room, the goddess's servants sit around a large triangular table. Bachman presides over the table, but one seat is empty. The door creaks loudly and unexpectedly, surprising everyone. The servants turn their heads, eyes wide open. 2 guards open the door, and Sister Mary enters, apologizing for being late. And bowing her head, Bachman smiles kindly and tells her she shouldn't apologize, because all the servants gathered a short while ago. Mary looks very worried. Bachman asks her to take the empty seat. Mary sits down, and the Holy Father declares the meeting about Saint Open. The saints discuss that lately they have been finding unconscious priests who lose their memory, and that today they found a dangerous weapon near one of them. But the most frightening thing for the goddess's servants is that all of this always happens near Saint. Following these events, Bachman proposes reinforcing the saint's security, and 2 goddesses' servants support him. Omar, one of the servants, is outraged and protests against the idea, claiming that the church has no funds. 2 more support him. Bachman considers his opinion and turns to Sister Mary, asking her what she thinks. Mary is startled by the question. The woman puts a hand to her heart, looks at Omar, and says that, just in case, it wouldn't hurt to reinforce security. Right now only Jorg protects the saint, and that is very little. The saint's security is not something one should save money on. Omar loses his temper and shouts that he is not opposed to reinforcing security. But the fact is that they don't have money right now, they can't afford it. The saints ignore him. They debate the reduction of donations, but insist that the church does have money. Archbishop Omar grabs his head. The priests do not understand economics. He was responsible for the money. He almost went bald. Omar begs the goddess's servants not to even mention reinforcing security until they get enough money. Mary falls silent, thoughtful. Suddenly, she stands up, raises her hand, and says that if the problem is the lack of money, she has an idea to solve it. Liana is standing, illuminated by a bright setting sun, her face hidden in shadow. She is talking to Chrome and is about to tell him something. Chrome looks at her with interest, and the girl tells him that even after death, she will remember this life, and in her new reincarnation, she will return to Runnebolt. The protagonist gives Chrome an immortality potion and tells him that if he uses it, they will be able to meet again in several decades. The girl tightly squeezes his hand and asks him to protect Runnebolt if she dies before obtaining the forbidden magic. All this is Chrome's memories that he ponders deeply during the conversation. A man in a robe catches his attention. Chrome confesses that he was a little distracted. He asks them to repeat what they said. They reply that the Holy Temple decided to reinforce security and opened a selection tournament to recruit people. Chrome takes the tournament announcement and discovers that participation is paid, and he is surprised that the saints charge people money for working. The man in the robe assumes that security is being reinforced due to the increase in attacks, and Chrome asks if there is news about the last sent kamikaze. The last kamikaze completely lost his memory, and that is why he started serving the saints. Chrome reflects on these words. He reaches the conclusion that this clearly could not have been the work of short-sighted priests, and it is surely the saints' doing. After his words, Jack suddenly appears in the window, very encouraged by the mention of the saint. He scared the man, but Chrome was not surprised at all. Chrome deduces that Jack was spying again, using spiritual power. Jack ignores him and excitedly asks if they were really referring to the saint. Getting no answer, he asks for permission to go to the tournament and says that if Chrome allows him, he will be very grateful afterwards. Chrome sighs loudly, leans on the table, and denies Jack permission, who is very surprised by the response. Chrome gets up, casts a shadow, and declares that he himself will go to that tournament organized by the church. Jack is surprised by Chrome's decision and tries to dissuade him, assuring him that he can hide his powers with spiritual power. But Chrome will be discovered quickly. Chrome interrupts him. Jack is already known by everyone as Runebelt's messenger, and if he appears, everyone will understand immediately. Jack tries again to dissuade Chrome, asking who will remain in charge of Runebelt if he leaves. Chrome just rubs his ring silently. Then he takes off the ring and throws it somewhere. The ring is tinged with a blue flame that gradually turns green. Finally, the ring lands in Beatrice's hands, who never thought Chrome would ever entrust his work to her. Beatrice promises to show what a great leader she is and asks Chrome not to return soon. She affirms that he shouldn't worry about anything. Chrome replies that he trusts her, and a stunned Jack starts shouting, asking Chrome to listen to his words until the end. In response, a bluish magic ace hits him. Jack jumps scared, and Chrome blames him for everything. The ruined temple began to rise only because Jack forgave the saint 5 years ago. Chrome starts to suspect his loyalty. Chrome notices that Jack was previously obsessed with Liana, and that now he is suddenly focused on the saint. He says that little by little, he is becoming convinced that the saint is the reincarnation of Liana. And things like that. Jack is horrified and falls silent, and Chrome declares that he must verify everything for himself and decide if the saint deserves to be forgiven. The priests finally prepare to give the official announcement about the girl's existence, and this greatly angers the saint. Mary gives her the news that the girl's security will be reinforced due to the announcement. The strongest and most worthy people on the continent will gather in the church for her. The saint screams that she doesn't want that, points to George, and says that he is more than enough to protect her. George bows to her and reminds her that the saint always says how much it bothers her. He regrets having to leave her soon. The saint screamed for George to stop following her everywhere, but she never asked for her guard to be changed. Mary wipes the crumbs from the girl's mouth and convinces her that it is all for her own good. She asks her to understand the goddess's servants. The saint thinks that she still hasn't found the forbidden magic, and more guards will only complicate things and delay her search. The girl cannot stop the tournament, so she looks for another way to avoid the security increase. Attracting George's attention, the saint approaches George, takes him by the edge of his cloak, and asks him not to leave. She says she likes him, and that's why she bothers him. This irritates George, who sheds a tear, while Sister Mary, observing, only smiles tenderly. George kneels before the girl, thinking that he would never have guessed the saint's thoughts, who always scolded him. And the saint, in a tone that admits no reply, asks him to go to the tournament, which surprises him and shocks him greatly. The girl looks at George with a haughty and determined smile, and he, in desperation, only asks the saint what she means. George I gives a solemn speech. He congratulates everyone who passed the selection tournament. All are worthy to be the Holy One's bodyguard. George announces the start of the tournament, raising his hands triumphantly. The crowd in front of him cheers loudly. In the depth of the crowd is George Ivy. He sighs with resignation. A bead of sweat runs down the boy's temple. He is clearly very tense. The boy remembers how he got here. He remembers how the saint unexpectedly proposed that he participate in this competition. The girl asked him to show his abilities for her, to destroy all rivals, and win. George tried to refuse with all his might, but the girl gently took his calloused hand and told him that she once chose the boy as her guard. She declares that her decision is influenced not only by the boy's strength, but also by how hard he tries when he is near her. And only she knows it. The saint tries to encourage the boy as much as she can. She asks him to win, so that everyone knows that her bodyguard can only be George and no one else. George looks at the girl in amazement, but replies that he understood her order and will fulfill it at all costs. The boy tightly clenches the fist of the hand the saint touched and swears to become the best, so that no one dares even to think anything against the saint's name. Behind George's back, 2 men murmur. They believe the boy entered without qualifiers because he is the son of paladins. The men think the boy doesn't have a chance to win, since only one passed the test on the first try. One of them tries to remember that man's name and finally succeeds. His name was Crumb. Crumb suddenly appears behind them, scaring them to death. With a deep voice, he asks them to let him pass. The saint is sitting, guarded by other saints, while they comb her hair. The little girl reads a paper with a confused face. It is the tournament accounts that Omar gave her. Mary sees no reason to show these documents to the little one. The saint looks at the sheet thoughtfully, trying to understand what is written, squinting her eyes, and bringing a finger to her lips. She realizes, surprised, that almost 9,000 people attended the tournament. Omar is happy to have funds to restore the temple. The registrations don't bring in as much money as the saint's images, which sell like hotcakes. The little girl asks how many copies have been sold. Omar replies that 10 copies are sold per person, and that an order for 10,000 copies arrived from the Northern Kingdom. The saint praises Omar and Mary for devising and organizing everything. She says she never thought of winning this way. The girl trusts Omar and asks him to make sure the money is safe. Omar looks at her mesmerized. He gets excited. He swears allegiance to the saint with fervor, but she looks at him with some confusion. Suddenly, an interesting idea crosses her mind. She plans to go watch the competitions. The battle is brutal. The warlike din floods everything. Men fight furiously to protect the saint. They fight in pairs in the open air, observed by the goddess's servants, who dictate who wins and who loses. The saint sneaks to the battle site and spies on the tournament from behind wooden crates. The girl curiously notices that there are runable calamities among the participants. Anyone could be her guard. She contemplates whom she would want as a guard. She considers Jack and Beatrice, but something on the battlefield distracts her. The organizers ask the fighters to present themselves before the fight. The saint takes a look and freezes. The girl sees Crom from behind and is shocked by his appearance, but she is not sure it is him. However, looking at him, the young woman remembers young Crom, who complained about the sacred power of the temple inhabitants, which irritated him greatly. Liana approached the boy, gently stroked his head, and told him that he shouldn't compare himself to others. The girl tells Crom that he, the other 6 mages, and their master are her family, and that she loves them all equally. Liana promises the boy to be everything to him, and in return he looks at her with huge eyes full of hope, and fully trusts her. The girl remembers the interesting times she spent with the sins of Runabald, little Crom, the cheerful Jack, and the others. She remembers Crom as a child, a smiling boy. She remembers how he grew before her eyes, how he smiled when he saw her, how he believed in her. But the memories fade when Liana sees before her Crom as a stern man, who has nothing to do with the young man she remembered. Crom introduces himself, states his full name, and says he is 18 years old. The goddess's servants and the contest participants are delighted with him. Liana is surprised by how young Crom looks. Since she thought he was over 25, the girl decides that he is not the Crom she knew. She tries to convince herself that he is another one, very similar in appearance and name. Moreover, Liana notices that she does not perceive his magical energy. If this man turns out to be the Crom she knew, he will certainly win this tournament. The young woman remembers how she taught Crom to fight and wield a sword, how she gave him advice on attacking, and how she only taught him to win. She is stunned to see how that man adopts the same stance that she once taught Crom. The opponent runs furiously towards Crom and swings the weapon forcefully, trying to hit him. But Crom remains still and impassive. But in an instant, he tightly grips the sword, rushes into the attack with fury in his eyes, and with a brutal blow, he disarms the attacker. The rival is astonished by Crom's strength. His hand trembles from the impact, but through the pain, he sees that Crom has also dropped his sword and decides to take it to attack first. Crom prevents him. He runs towards the man and raises his hand over him, intending to strike him hard, but his face remains expressionless. The sin of wrath grabs the man by the face and forcefully slams the back of his head against the ground. The man is so stunned that he cannot even resist. Crom stares severely at the unconscious man, lying in the small hole caused by the blow, and screams that he is weak. The saint, in shock, loses her balance and falls to the ground, attracting the attention of a servant with the noise. She saw him. It's Crom. For sure. The saint felt his magical energy during the attack. He used the weapon only as a lure. The people look at the saint, wondering if she is really the holy girl. The goddess's servant panics. Crom also looks at her, with palpable cruelty and hatred in his cold gaze. How chilling. The saint sees his empty eyes, tenses up, and suddenly understands that Crom wants to kill her. Danger. 2 men comment on George IV, but this time they highlight his achievements. George reached the tournament final. They confess that they did not take him seriously because of his age. They thought he wouldn't get far, but George is more capable than they thought. But George won't be able to win this time. His next opponent is Crom, whom he had not faced until now. Crom was already stronger than George, and now the boy is injured, with a broken arm. He has no chance. They think his skills are only due to being from a family of paladins, unaware of the effort the boy has put into his training. The men think the boy is weak. He only went to the tournament to pretend to try hard, and they doubt his lineage. They believe they forced the boy into the tournament, which is unfair to the other participants. They think Jorg has no talent, not knowing how hard he tried and the difficulties he overcame. The saint appears before Jorg, examines his injuries. She didn't expect this. She looks at him severely. Jorg apologizes and starts crying. The saint says it's too soon to apologize, but assumes everything is over. His life depends on Jorg's fight against Atrom. She must encourage him, but he is unwell and doesn't know how to start. Jorg, with tears, tells her he wanted to show her his abilities, to prove he is better than the others. She listens to him attentively. She experienced something similar and plunges into memories from when she was a child. She remembers apologizing to her master, saying she wanted to surprise him. But she erred in magic, and the stones scattered. She trembled, awaiting his disappointment and anger, as she burned books he cared for. He examines a burnt page. The man asks Liana if she knows the meaning of her name, and reminds her that it means light, and that she shouldn't grieve over nonsense. Memories of that event change to memories of the master's death. Armored warriors executed him in front of everyone. It was pouring rain that day. The little girl fixes her gaze on the staff that the men snatched from her master. It looks broken. That vision terrifies Liana. The girl is about to cry. The rain washes away the dead master's blood. His skin color looks unnatural. People watch his death like a spectacle. The saint's thoughts return to a bright and pleasant day. She remembers how the master rejoiced that she wasn't injured in the book incident. The saint clenches her fists and decides to approach Jorg to stroke his head. The boy is very surprised and asks the girl what she is doing. She tells Jorg that he did an excellent job. She calls him her knight. The boy is still a child, and he will have plenty of time to perfect himself. There is nothing wrong with making mistakes. Everyone has failures, and there will be many more ahead. But today Jorg tried hard, and that is enough. The boy starts crying even harder, which frightens the saint a lot. The girl decides that Jorg has been holding everything in, and that's why he is crying so hard now. Jorg throws himself into hugging the saint, and she hugs him back. The temple atmosphere is affecting her. She has become too kind. But then the saint hesitates. Maybe she acts this way because she was once like George. Although she decides not to think about it, the saint asks George to hide from others that she healed him with her divine power. She begs him to fight without regrets. George nods encouraged. He understood everything. The girl is amazed at how quickly the upset boy recovered. George offers to take her to her bedroom, but she refuses and will go alone. George nods in response and thanks the saint for her help. The saint turns to him with a big smile and tells him that she will only accept words of thanks after the victory. The girl walks down the empty corridor and regrets having refused George's help because she used a flow of divine power and it exhausted her greatly. She is tired. The saint is happy to see Sister Mary looking for her and is about to run towards the woman to inform her of her presence. The girl opens her mouth to call her sister by name, but a man suddenly appears from behind, preventing her. He covers the saint's mouth and drags her around the corner, to the end of the hallway. The girl struggles desperately. Mary hears nothing and passes by. The man orders the girl to be quiet, while she tries to understand how he could approach so stealthily. If before she noticed the assassins instantly, but she decides to think no more and bites his hand. His skin turns horribly pale, and he screams in pain. The saint falls to the ground. He curses her, and she tries to understand why she doesn't feel his magical energy, which was always so intense. The girl decides to think about it later and uses her divine power, with which she believes the man will weaken and will give up quickly. But to her surprise, nothing happens to him. He should have already fallen from such a torrent of power, but the divine attack does not affect him. He gets closer and raises his hand to hit her. The saint doesn't react in time. He hits her on the back and presses her against the ground, laughing at her powerlessness. She looks him in the face with pain. A priest is in front of the saint. Now she understands why her divine powers didn't work on him. The priest starts saying strange things about overthrowing the temple. He says the saint is guilty of all his failures and takes out a knife. The girl understands that she doesn't have the strength to resist. The man raises the knife and prepares to kill her mercilessly. He smiles maliciously, sure of his victory, but suddenly someone appears behind him and raises his hand to hit him on the head. The priest falls to the ground, unconscious from the brutal blow. The saint looks in horror at the man standing over her. It's Chrome. The girl tries to understand his intentions. She thought he was going to kill her, but now he saves her heroically. Doubt invades her. Chrome calls her by her new name, surprising her. She tries to control herself, not to give herself away. Chrome kneels in front of her and asks how she came to be like this, calling her by her real name. Liana. The young woman plunges into memories. Liana plays chess with Chrome and tells a story about her life, stating that she doesn't believe in love. The girl claims that love is just a lie. Even those who swore to love her never recognized her after reincarnation. She raises her eyes towards Chrome and sees that he looks at her gloomily, with his head bowed. The girl asks what bothers him. Chrome replies that he cannot have fun after hearing that story. Liana lowers her gaze to the table and reflects on his words. Chrome affirms that under no circumstances would he make such a mistake. Liana's eyes open in surprise. The girl thinks about how serious Chrome looks saying all this. It completely destabilizes her. She doesn't know what to answer. Chrome asks Lion why she is like this, but she doesn't understand since no one has recognized her. Neither Jack nor the strongest mages. She emits an interrogative sound. Chrome leans over her and silently looks severely at the girl's face. He gets even closer and asks if Lion really doesn't remember anything. She tries not to show her confusion so as not to give herself away. She understands that if Chrome discovers who she is, he will take her away. And in the worst case, he will unleash a war. And she will never be able to obtain the forbidden magic. She tries to pass herself off as a normal girl. She forces tears and says that she got very scared and almost cried. She pretends to know nothing. Chrome's face cools. The girl calls him knight and thanks him for the rescue, noticing the severity of his face and the icy atmosphere around him. Mary sees them both, calls the saint by her name, and asks out loud what is happening. The girl is happy about her arrival and jumps up. Mary examines her face and notices that the saint has been hurt a lot. She asks if something dangerous happened to her, and the girl replies that they saved her in time. Chrome gets up and informs Mary of the assassination attempt on the saint. He proposes taking the terrorist for interrogation and, through torture, reaching his leader. Mary sincerely thanks him for saving the saint. The girl looks at him cautiously, but Chrome says nothing more. He looks at her silently and with some regret. He politely asks for forgiveness, turns around and leaves. Bachman is terrified by the news of the attack on the saint. He opens his eyes wide in panic and speaks, sometimes shouting. Mary discusses with him the possibility of postponing the final of the tournament. Since they haven't found the ringleader yet, and it could be dangerous, Bachman agrees. The saint calls them by their names. Mary and Bachman sharply turn towards her, look at her with interest, and prepare to listen to her words. The girl is standing by the window. She says she is fine and asks for the final to be held at the scheduled time. Bachman tries to dissuade her, but the saint interrupts him and says that at the tournament, they must proclaim her existence to the four winds, since many people look at her sideways. The girl thinks that, of course, she is not pleased to have been reborn in the saint's body, but she also doesn't feel like dying at the hands of others. Bachman puts a hand to his heart, kneels before the girl, and bows his head. He swears to the saint that he will always protect her. The Holy Father turns to the goddess's acolytes and orders them to reinforce security, and in case of detecting suspicious persons, to stop the tournament immediately. He begs them not to forget that the saint is now the most important thing. The girl looks at them severely, and all the acolytes reply in unison that they have understood the order. The saint wonders again how Crom could have recognized her. Since no one else doubts that she is the saint, she reflects on this from a sunlit balcony, observing the battlefield with a serious face. Before her, a huge empty space stretches out, where only Chrome and York are. The saint's posture reveals her tension. She has not managed to decipher Chrome's plans, but she is determined to fulfill her mission. At any cost, the saint attentively watches the battle. She notices that Jurg's body is covered in scars, proof of his arduous effort to get this far. She declares that everyone present supports the fighters and that their worth will be confirmed, regardless of the duel's outcome. She raises her hand in an invoking gesture and gives them her blessing for a successful fight. The last round of the tournament begins. George Ivy versus Chrome. A fierce battle breaks out between George and Crom. Neither yields ground. Both attack each other with brutal force. Crom, with a completely indifferent expression, expresses his deep disgust for divine power. George frowns, looking him in the eyes. Sweat runs down his face. He is exhausted, but swears he will never give up. Bachman asks the saint who he thinks deserves victory, but she would gladly give it to both. The saint notes the difference in the participants' worldview, as Jorg achieved his mastery through arduous training, whereas Crom always had exceptional talent. Thinking about this, the girl plunges into memories of when little Crom showed her a stone bird created with magic. Liana couldn't take her eyes off him. His talent impressed her greatly, as she herself failed to create that bird on the first try. Crom was sincerely happy to have succeeded on the first try. He said it was all thanks to Liana and wanted to hear her praise. But the girl couldn't answer. Her emotions mixed envy for his talent and joy for his achievements. Finally, she controlled herself and congratulated him dryly. The pensive saint looks into the void, but her eyes turn to the battlefield, attracting Crom's attention. The man turns towards her and reflects on what the saint's thoughts might be occupied with at this moment. But Crom is distracted in vain, as his opponent has well-developed close combat skills and, noticing his hesitation, Jorg strikes Crom with a quick sword blow. Still, Crom's skills are enough to repel the boy's next blow. He strikes his sword forcefully, but George manages to keep the weapon in his hands. Despite everything, George IV managed to wound Chromo with the first blow to the cheek. A thin gash appeared on his face. George decides he has found a weak spot and waits for the perfect moment to strike a precise blow. However, Chromo gets irritated. He presses his sword forcefully. George's legs falter. He has trouble staying on his feet. Chromo says his patience is running out, and he doesn't have to keep fighting with weapons. He is going to crush Jorge with one blow. But the shouts from the goddess's servants and Bachman distract him. They shout the saint's name. Chromo turns his head. He sees the saint's small body falling rapidly from a high balcony. No one even tries to catch her. 5 minutes earlier, a goddess's servant ran to the balcony at full speed, alarming the guards. But they let her pass before Bachman, whose arrival also surprised him, distracting him from the tournament. The girl, panting, says that during the works in the temple something collapsed, and many people are trapped. The priests cannot help. Bachman frowns. The event frightens him. He decides to go to the site himself to help the injured. He was going to inform the saint of his decision. He wanted someone to stay with the girl to avoid an accident, but the saint paid him no attention. The girl watched the events on the field with interest, as if disconnected from reality. Mary smiled, noticing it. She finds it endearing that the saint is so focused on the competitions that she doesn't even hear the conversations behind her back. The saint reflects that, despite Atrom's clear superiority over George, the latter strives to the utmost not to yield. And moreover, he is progressing. She wonders what will happen to Atrom if Jorg wins. And at that moment, a woman who just ran onto the balcony approaches her from behind. Mary tries to stop the woman with a shout, which attracts the saint's attention. But it's too late. The servant has gotten close enough. The woman says that the saint's death will cause Bachman's downfall. The people behind her shout in horror and cannot move. The saint looks at her with mute terror. The servant pushes the girl hard, and she flies off backward from the balcony. Amidst the crowd screams, Bachman, Mary, terrified, and the guards. The time of the fall is very short, but thoughts of death manage to visit her. The girl decides that despite all the difficulties, this life wasn't so bad. She doesn't have time to think properly, that she still hasn't managed to find the forbidden magic and meet her minions, because just before hitting the ground, hands catch her. The girl doesn't understand why she didn't feel pain upon falling. She hears sighs from the audience and cautiously opens her eyes upon hearing their voices. The saint realizes that she landed on something soft. She realizes it is Crom's body, who is currently unconscious beneath her. The girl realizes, horrified, that despite her magical strength, her body is no different from any ordinary human's. She understands that Crom must have suffered extremely serious injuries trying to catch her. He lies unconscious, and the girl tries to wake him with all her might. She shouts his name, shakes him by the shoulders, but he doesn't respond. This greatly frightens the saint, who remains paralyzed over him, terrified. A frightened judge approaches from behind, with a flag in his hand. He examines Crom, but says nothing about his condition. Instead, the man declares Jorg the winner of the tournament, since, upon examining him, he sees that Crom left the competition area, and disqualifies him. The goddess's servants touch Crom's limbs with trembling hands, and determine that both his arms are broken. They call a healer to the field. The saint moves away a little, and hears how the audience begins to discuss Jorg's unfair victory loudly. She turns to those speaking and clearly hears their reproaches, in which they call Jorg a weak boy, and the tournament a simple circus. The girl understands that these comments will affect Jorg. She turns to assess his condition. Jorg trembles. His body is tense. He hears the clamor branding him unworthy and struggles not to cry. The people anger the girl. She runs to help Jorg, leaving the stunned goddess's servant behind. Jorg is alone on the field, under furious stares, thinking that the people in the stands are right. He didn't want to win like this. The boy didn't care about winning or losing. He wanted a clean fight to show his worth. But now they think he is weak. Jorg starts to believe he lacks pride, but a girl approaching from behind distracts him from that thought. The saint cautiously approaches and takes Jorg's hand holding the sword, causing him great surprise. The girl admits she didn't want to come to this, but after the competition, she can't let things stand as they are. With a quick gesture, she removes her hair ornaments, lets it down, and releases a torrent of divine power to attract attention. She begins her speech. She swears by the goddess. She says she saw the matches, the dedication and honest effort of the participants. The people listen in silence. The saint says she will honor the valor of Jorg and Crom by naming them personal knights. But Jorg tries to object. The saint cuts his attempt short. He cannot question her decision. She doesn't want to hear that Jorg doesn't deserve to be a knight. The girl praises Jorg for his achievements, and he starts crying silently, without letting go of her hand. She smiles at him. Suddenly, she hears noises behind her and turns, observing a horrible scene. They are carrying the injured Crom on a stretcher to the hospital. Crom remembers when Liana showed him magic. She asked him to look intently, without looking away. She tried to give him advice on sorcery, but it was vague. He didn't understand anything, but he didn't say it out loud. Liana jumps up suddenly. She gives Crom a bag of food and says she has to leave. Her master is surely waiting for her. The boy looks at the bag surprised. Liana waves goodbye. She promises to bring more food and asks him to share with his friends. Crom comes to his senses and calls the girl who is walking away. He wants to know her name, but he is very ashamed. Liana shudders upon hearing him shout, but she turns around and introduces herself, revealing her full name and its meaning. The girl chats with an old beggar to whom she has just given a food package, telling him that today she brought a little extra and asking him to share it with those who suffer. The old man sincerely thanks the young woman and politely asks her to convey the people's gratitude to Lord Runebelt. Crom is around the corner, observing the girl with interest. He thinks they don't see him and allows himself to peek out a little more. Suddenly, Liana appears behind him, almost glowing from the flow of magic, and she asks Crom out loud why he is hiding there. The boy gets scared, but Liana ignores his fright. She magically creates a food package and says she has been looking for the boy for a long time, and she is glad to have finally found him. The girl hands him the food package and tells him that if it's not enough, he can come see her, or the master, and ask for more. Crom asks if the master and Liana will have any food left if they keep sharing with everyone, and if they won't have trouble if the emperor finds them and tries to harm them. Liana suddenly gets up abruptly and shouts offended that none of that can happen, and that the emperor only knows how to look down on everyone. Liana puts her hand to her heart and assures the boy that the master will be able to protect her, no matter what happens. And then she smiles radiantly, and no longer so serious, says that she is also quite strong, and that she can defend herself alone. Crom, seeing her confident face and wide smile, thought it would be great to make the girl happy someday. Liana is on an empty battlefield. She reflects on the meaning of mortal life, observing the dust rising from the rotten earth. She decides that the beauty of the world and human happiness are meaningless, as man is mortal. And after his death, all problems lose meaning. Tears run down the girl's cheeks. She turns to Crom, who is behind her, and says she terribly misses the master. Crom notices that, after Runbelt's death, he hasn't seen that beautiful smile on Liana's face again. Bright and kind, he decided that Liana could only smile as intensely as in her childhood if she achieved her goal. So Crom decided to stay by her side. After her death, Crom simply decided to wait for the girl's rebirth, killing everyone who stood in his way. Shortly before dying, Liana told Crom that she would be reborn in a new body, in the best-case scenario, the day after her death, and in the worst case, in 3 years. Therefore, Crom decides that the wait won't be that long. He eagerly awaited their meeting, bringing fresh bouquets to Liana's body every day. When the news about the saint reached him, he decided to kill the girl, as he considered her an obstacle for Liana. Crom was going to kill her with his own hands so that the saints would notice his magic. Just as Crom was plotting the girl's murder, she ran past with Jorg. He was urging her to rehearse her speech. Crom noticed how the saint responded to Jorg, and how she fled instantly upon hearing about the rehearsals. Suddenly, he remembered how much Liana hated cramming, how she avoided it with all her might. Crom knew instantly that the saint was Liana. He believed the feelings intensified when the magic closed off. Almost immediately, he noticed that the saint's habits and manners were almost identical to Liana's. Jorg scolded her and took her away while Crom was thinking. But with this conclusion, Crom asks himself another question. He tries to understand why Liana didn't return to Runnebolt with Jack and decides that she forgot everything. Then he devised an even more terrible version. He decided that it meant nothing to Liana. This enraged Crom. He clenched his fists in anger. The man decides that he must take the girl to Runnebolt at all costs. He was on the balcony in front of her room, waiting for the moment to enter. He heard the saint crying inside the room and looked. He heard the girl crying over a nightmare, and Mary, approaching, calmed her down. Crone looked at the girl with sadness and looked away. He decided that if Liana was happy there, he should leave her and depart silently. Mary called the girl to hug her tightly. The saint gladly approached and melted into the embrace, clinging to the woman. Despite the hug, the tears did not stop, but a smile of satisfaction appeared on her face, and she began to fall asleep. Crom silently retreated from the balcony. He decided to pretend not to recognize her in the next encounter. He was furious with Liana, but nevertheless ran fearfully to save her from the fall, as he respected her. When she tried to revive him, he incoherently begged her not to call him by his name, since they didn't know each other at all. But she didn't listen to him. She got closer and closer, but instead of the little saint, Crom saw Liana. The changes in the girl greatly disturbed him. Crom woke up after the injury, with the idea that he should discard his feelings, since Liana was alive, but no longer the person she was before. Carefully, he gets up in bed, sits down and looks around. He understands that he is in a hospital, but is barely surprised. Crom is irritated by having lost consciousness from a simple wound. He prepares to reflect on it, but something warm touching his palm distracts him. He lowers his gaze and sees that the little saint is beside him, clinging to his finger and purring peacefully. Crom looks at the girl with amazement, unable to move. He purses his lips at the avalanche of emotions and prepares to do something. But a man bursts into the hospital, making Crom flinch, but without letting go of the saint's hand. Crom recognizes Bachman, the man who once held the title of Sacred Shield. The image of young Bachman floods his mind, but he quickly recovers and understands that Bachman has aged, and he is no longer the Sacred Shield. Now he is the Holy Father. Bachman asks about his hands. He says the saint healed them with a blessing. Crom looks at his healed hands, completely amazed. The man looks sadly at the sleeping saint, while Bachman decides to tell him how she fixed his hair. Crom abruptly interrupts him and tells him that he was disqualified and has nothing to do there. He gets up and releases the saint's hand. The man gets out of bed, puts on the clothes he took off before the tournament, says he is leaving, and walks proudly to the exit, passing by Bachman. The Holy Father, without turning around or showing any emotion, asks if the man's name is really Crom. He states that Crom strongly resembles an acquaintance of his. Crom immediately understands what he means and tenses up. His face is hidden in the shadows. Bachman says a long time has passed and that he probably doesn't remember much, but that some moments, on the contrary, are impossible to forget. Bachman perfectly remembered that, of all those he met and fought, Crom was the strongest and dangerous. Bachman and Crom have grim faces, lost in memories of past years, and terrible battles in which they fought. Bachman smiles and says that Crom strongly resembles that man, but it cannot be him because Crom, the one he knew, should be very old by now. Crom looks at the smiling Bachman and remembers that, despite his kind appearance, the man always attacked weak points. Mercilessly, Crom clenches his fists, remembering how Bachman pushed Runnebolt back from the battlefield. But with a serious face, he replies that he doesn't understand what he is talking about. Bachman says he doesn't care who Crom is, since he protected the temple's treasure twice, and the Holy Father won't be able to repay him even with his life. Bachman bows to Crom, asks him to stay in the church, as it is the saint's wish. Crom is astonished that this man, who yielded to no one on the battlefield, so easily bows his head and asks for help for the saint. The man understands that, in that case, he won't be able to take Liana easily. They will always be watching him. Crom thinks about how Bachman humbles himself for the saint without being able to express his loyalty to her. Crom decides to take drastic measures. He asks Bachman if he meant the sin of wrath, speaking of a hero and calling him the strongest he ever knew. He recalls Bachman's title and his forgotten nickname, Invincible Sword, and asks again if he was talking about the sin of wrath among Runebelt's 7 calamities. He bows his head, his face hidden in the shadows, and asks with a malicious smile if Bachman was implying that Crom strongly resembles the sin of wrath. The Holy Father straightens up and looks at the man severely. He reflects for a moment and prepares to give an answer to Crom, but he is interrupted by the saint, who suddenly wakes up, drawing attention, and complaining about the noise they caused. Bachman asks the girl if she has woken up. The saint replies with an unintelligible sound. She rubs her eyes and yawns sleepily. The girl tells the Holy Father that her mouth is dry, and the man, hearing this, offers to go to the kitchen to get something to drink. Crom watches Bachman's back and decides that their conversation has deviated a bit, and that he is now in a very compromising situation. He decides to approach the saint's bed and ask her if she slept well, and she, in response, looks at him drowsily and doesn't understand who he is. She wakes up abruptly remembering how yesterday she healed Crom and then fell asleep beside him. The girl looks at Crom with horror in her eyes. She finds it hard to talk about what happened in the tournament, but the saint believes she must say something. She tries to start the conversation. Crom scoffs with a sigh and says that the girl did not meet his expectations. He thought she was the incarnation of the goddess, but she is just a normal girl. The saint is indignant, but Crom continues saying that she is weak, that he wasted his time on her. This is his plan to unmask the saint. Crom clears his throat. There is actually nothing to thank her for. He regrets not having understood immediately that the girl is very weak and overestimated her. The saint trembles with rage, explodes, and screams that she knows so much, that her knowledge far exceeds that of her master. Crom kneels in front of her and smiles. The girl realizes that she has been caught and calms down a little. Crom confirms that he recognized her. He calls the girl by her real name. Liana gets angry again. She frowns and clenches her small fists. The girl asks Crom at what point he recognized her. The man knew immediately, because the girl hadn't changed at all and neither had her killer instinct. Liana explodes again and screams that she is still holding back. Crom teases the girl, sticking his tongue out, but quickly changes his mood. He puts his hand on his heart. Crom believed in her rebirth, because in that life the girl promised him she would return. Crom puts her on the spot, asking her why she didn't return to Runnebolt. Liana silently ponders her answer. She has to confess her failed search for the forbidden magic, which her master hid around here. She fails to find the magic because Bachman refuses to reveal it to her, arguing that she is still too young. Liana will surely find the forbidden magic, but only when she comes of age. When the temple's secrets are revealed, Crom watches her thoughtfully. Liana is forced to survive in this small, uncomfortable body and live in ignorance. Even after her rebirth, she remains faithful to her master and yearns to find the forbidden magic, as if she were bound to it. If this is what drives the saint, the only thing Crom can do is follow her wherever she goes. He kneels in front of her, kisses her small hand, and swears to stay by her side forever, until the end of time. The man accepts everything she desires. He only longs for her happiness and promises to support her at all times. The young woman looks at him astonished, reflecting on the man's words and her current situation. Crom does not intend to return to Runnebolt. This stresses Liana, and she decides to ask the man. He is surprised by her question. He remembers how the saint asked him to stay in the temple, begged him not to abandon her, and told the servants how much she cared about him. At that moment, Bahamon entered, the saint, who could not remember saying such things. She decided that he was slandering her. The girl furiously lunged at him, intending to teach the insolent old man a lesson and show who is in charge there. The person Chromo cared about so much is now alive and breathing in this world. He will no longer have to wait for the girl's return. These thoughts, reinforced by the saint's furious screams, gladden Chromo, and he begins to smile intensely, chuckling. The official meeting of the saint's knights takes place in one of the spacious halls of the temple. Chromo is in his new uniform and looks down with interest at little Jorg. The boy looks at Chromo upside down, from bottom to top. He is a little nervous. It shows on his tense face. The knights officially greet each other. After bowing, Jorg approached Chromo and very quietly asked permission to ask a question that was worrying him. Chromo nodded silently, and Jorg asked how old he really was. The man was dumbfounded. He wanted to lie, but this time he decided to tell his real age. Jorg was not ready to hear such a high number. It turns out Atrom is 68 years old. Jorg III enters, fascinated by Atrom's confidence and strength. He asks him to protect the saint from anyone who threatens her. Jorg believes that the attackers are most likely sent by Runnebolt. As proof, he recalls Jack's case, but Atrom disagrees. Perhaps the threat comes from within. Someone from the temple has set his sights on the saint. Jorg is shocked, but his father calms him down, as that possibility also exists. Not everyone is happy with the saint. While they discuss the plan, the saint enters. She remembers conversations of the attackers and believes they want the position of Holy Father. The girl falls silent and stares fixedly at Jairam. She evaluates his clothes with her gaze. The man observes her incessantly. The new outfit suits Jairam well, and the saint tells him so. Jairam thanks her for the compliment. They leave compliments aside and get to the point. They start talking about the attacks on the saint. Jorg observes the conversation jealously. The only one who would benefit from Bamon's departure, as Holy Father, is his brother Omar. In the hierarchy, he is next. The saint starts trembling from cold and fear, but tries to hide it. She asks everyone to be careful and not cross paths with Omar. George notices the trembling in the girl's body and takes off his cloak to cover her, but he does it too late. Chrome gets ahead of him and places his huge cloak over the saint's shoulders. She is still a little cold, but sincerely thanks Chrome for his care. George, observing this, is completely bewildered. Chrome, without any intention, practically pushes the boy away from the saint. Chrome knows the saint too well. This alarms George, as he has known the saint for 5 years, but cannot react so quickly to her wishes. And Chrome, who hasn't been near the girl for even 5 weeks, understands her immediately. Besides being very strong and intelligent, George feels like there is no place for him next to the saint anymore. He becomes very distressed when he thinks about it. The boy feels bad and communicates it to the saint. The girl asks worriedly where and what hurts the boy, intending to heal him. But emotional pain cannot be healed by the goddess's power. George understands this and heroically runs out of the room so as not to embarrass himself in front of the girl. He intends to rest a bit. The boy sincerely regrets his action, as the saint cares about him and he blatantly lies to her about his condition due to certain concerns. George I runs after his son. Saint and Chromo condemn young George's obvious pretense. They sit at the table. Chromo feeds the girl cake. Hey. They discuss George's action and Chromo compares him, unintentionally, to Beatrice. The saint does not like the comparison, but agrees with its truthfulness. Beatrice constantly complained when Liana dedicated less time to her than to Chromo. George is probably behaving strangely for the same reason as Beatrice. Chromo says it out loud. The saint does not react to his words. George's problems do not concern Chromo, so he does not continue the topic and continues to feed Santa in silence. They continue discussing the theory about Omar, but the man is busy with accounts. He is very busy. That is his main argument in favor. Chromo and Santa return to square one. They still have no suspects. The girl sinks into her thoughts. The girl decides to think like a criminal. She asks Chromo to think of an action plan, imagining herself in the culprit's place. The man recalls all the events that occurred. It is now impossible to approach Santa due to increased security after 2 failed attacks. Chromo makes an allegory of the situation. He imagines Santa as an untouchable tree that needs to be eliminated. He tries to devise how to do it, and notices at his feet flowers from the field where this untouchable tree grows. This leads him to think that next time they won't attack Santa herself, but her surroundings, and those she cares about. This idea interested the girl. She tensed up and started reviewing the people she cares about, looking for the most vulnerable ones. Mary is always surrounded by people. Attacking her by surprise is practically impossible. Home or Bamon could be attacked as a knight and close friend of the saint, and the Holy Father, leader of the temple. But in that case, on the contrary, it would be a miracle if the attackers survived an encounter with such prodigies. The people around the saint can be easy prey. Attacking any of them is simple, as no one expects a back attack. The tearful Jorg IV is attacked at the very moment the saint thinks about his safety. The boy cannot resist the attackers. A bright light appears in front of the terrified Jorg. The boy shouts at the attackers, asking them to stop. He falls silent when the beam of light points directly into his eyes. Jorg squints because of the light. His face is distorted. When he regains his sight, he looks confusedly at the dark place they dragged him to. And the people who did it. They introduce themselves. They are all temple servants, and Jorg even knows many of them personally. He only remembers others. With horror, he recognizes in each of them not just people, but priests in the service of Lord Omar. The men begin to laugh maliciously, confessing their loyalty to Lord Omar. And they smile disgustingly at the boy. Jorg accuses the men of attempted murder, and they do not hide their guilt. They believe murder is the best method to save the temple. They want to save the temple from a witch hiding behind the saint's mask. But Jorg only knows one witch, Liana, and she died long ago. The boy considers this statement about the saint unjustified slander. The men mock his naivety. One of them asks if Jorg really believes the girl is the saint, if he hasn't noticed anything strange about her behavior. Jorg remembers all the girl's oddities. In his opinion, she behaves as if she had lived many lives. This gives him strange ideas. He approaches the truth in his reflections. The man in the robe approaches him, and encourages him to keep thinking in that direction. And then he starts convincing the boy that the saint's appearance is just a ridiculous plan by Bachman to take the leader's position. He started speaking too harshly about Bachman, completely unsettling Jorg. The accusations of the men struck him. It turns out that Mr. Bachman has nothing to do with the conspiracy. He only manages the money and does not plan to change the temple hierarchy for his benefit. The men tell the boy too much, trying to draw him to their side. They want him to lend them a hand in overthrowing the Holy Father. They burst out laughing again. They ask the boy to confirm aloud that he is joining their ranks, but they only receive silence in response. The boy shouts, defending Omar and Baman, people who are completely dedicated to their work in the temple. Despite all his flaws, the boy will not allow them to be insulted. He criticizes the men for their attempts at manipulation, for slandering the saint. He will not tolerate them insulting the girl. But the men do not tolerate his shouts. One of them grabs the boy by the neck and slams him against the wall. Jorg cannot resist. The assassins regret not being able to come to an understanding with Jorg. He simply doesn't listen to them, and they are unwilling to listen to him. The only solution to this misunderstanding that the men see is to kill the boy. One of the assassins reaches for a knife. George prepares for the blow. Suddenly, something breaks loudly behind the men, scattering into pieces, and a bright sunlight floods the room. In the opening in the demolished wall appears Chrome, despising the gathered men, so inept that they don't even know how to hide their tracks. Behind him appears a frightened Omar, furious because they falsified his accounting and caused him a lot of trouble. Crom abruptly approaches Jorg, and with one hand pushes away the dangerous man with the knife. He unties him and explains how he found him, following the clumsy kidnapping clues left by the inept criminals. The saint herself led the search. She was very worried about Jorg. That said, Crom hands the boy his small sword. He was going to take care of the criminals himself and sent Jorg to rest, but the boy longs to teach them a lesson. He cannot stand aside after all the insults he heard about the saint. Crom and Jorg prepare for the attack. The boy's eyes burn with determination, ready to defend the saint's good name with all his might. The battle begins. Omar, observing the scene, is paralyzed, wishing to immortalize this spectacle in his memories. Thanks to 2 incredible nights, the perpetrators of the attacks were found. George IV was saved, and the incident was resolved. The next day, George asked Chromo to accompany him to the training ground to practice his combat techniques. Chromo won again, but George shows no trace of frustration, almost radiating joy. The boy admires Chromo's strength. He is grateful not to face him as an enemy. Chromo is surprised by his good spirits. Chromo asks George the reason for the duel, and the boy, somewhat embarrassed, admits that he envies his skills and his strength. The boy wanted to fight without reservation against Chromo to learn the necessary skills to protect the saint. Chromo is amazed by his honesty and does not hide it. The boy's desires fill him with joy. The saint knows how hard George tries and needs him very much. Therefore, Chromo extends his hand to him and asks him to follow him. The girl cannot be left alone for long, and since she likes George's company so much, he must be by her side as much time as possible. George's and Chromo's desires to protect the saint converge. As faithful knights, they will follow her to defend her from all danger. Incredible news about the saints, new guardian knights spreads across the continent, bringing peace to the city. But this news reaches Runebolt, to an enraged Beatriz, who without hesitation declares Chrome a traitor. She vows to finish off all gossip, Chrome, and the saint, and the arrival of peace is called into question. Liana and Chrome eat something in a small establishment, which seems to be over 50 years old, but Liana is sure it will last 100 more. The girl strongly wishes to meet Chrome again in this establishment in her next life. These words are engraved forever in Chrome's memory. An already adult man enjoys eating in that establishment, savoring the same delicacies with which Liana used to treat him. In the bustling, crowded establishment, Chrome does not stand out in the crowd. The establishment's cook addresses him and thanks him for another visit. The cook knows who Chrome really is. He helped him participate in competitions without raising suspicion. The cook does this in gratitude to the Calamity Mages and the witches who freed the people from the terrible emperor. Chrome darkens at the thought. He wishes with all his might that the deceased Liana had heard the cook's words, since she cared deeply about those she couldn't save. The cook himself rescues him from dark thoughts, bringing Chrome a free treat as a sign of respect. His son starts complaining. This treat is quite expensive. The cook yells at him. Chrome is too important, and he won't skimp on him. Crom observes the treat they brought him. Before, this fruit was not so expensive, nor considered a luxury item. But now this fruit, which contains neither flavor nor beneficial microelements, is served only to special guests. The saint hurries, runs quickly down the corridor to the room, where the goddess's servants receive her, and offer her to sit wherever she wants. They wish the girl to enjoy her meal and congratulate her on her good work in class and her progress in learning. The saint sits down on a chair and cheerfully thanks everyone. She promises to eat heartily and smiles kindly at everyone present. The servants notice that the girl becomes more charming every year. Her smile makes each of them feel healthy, but only the saint improves every year. George runs into the room, out of breath, begging the saint to wait for him. George Ivy also begins to bloom. He is obviously maturing, gradually changing his appearance and character. He approaches the saint and scolds her, because the girl left alone, with only one guard today. The saint insolently contradicts him. The servants comment on the boy's beauty. They long for his coming of age. Jorg seems the most handsome in the temple to them, but one servant disagrees. For him, the most beautiful is Chrome, and he has strong arguments. The man tells how he brought breakfast to Chrome's room, but he didn't answer or open the door. And when he finally opened it, Chrome appeared only with a towel around his waist. The servant was shocked. Years have passed since that incident, but the image of half-naked Chrome is still imprinted in his mind. Meanwhile, the saint notices with astonishment that food is missing from the table. Jorg says he sees nothing strange. The girl gets furious when she sees there is no melon. It doesn't seem like a tragedy to Jorg. It contains nothing nutritious. The saint, furious, starts hitting Jorg. His attitude irritates her, and she orders him to bring the melon. Jorg gives up. He begs her to stop. The melon has been very expensive lately. He simply cannot get it. The rise in the price of the sacred fruit seems like an absurd excuse. The temple is not that poor. The helpers can surely buy a melon. The girl starts to understand. Something happened in the temple, hence the money problems. She asks Kjork, and the boy says nothing special happened, and that the saint shouldn't worry so much. The saint's face changes at his words. She falls silent and purses her lips. She has heard speeches like this many times, in all her reincarnations. In each of them, she died before reaching adulthood. That's why the girl's whole life consisted of childhood. The childhood a child should live. The girl never had the opportunity to gain experience. Adults always decided everything for her. Lion believed that the saint's life would be different, but in the end, it differs in no way from the previous ones. Jorg looks tensely at the girl's expression and, unable to bear it any longer, starts telling what happened in the temple. In reality, what happened is not the temple's fault. There is another problem. Atrom puts his hand in the inner pocket of his jacket. He pulls out a newspaper from it and gives it to the saint. Upon reading it, the girl should understand what it is about. After reading it written down, the saint's face contorts. Her eyes open enormously. She looks at the newspaper with disgust and bewilderment. At the same time, in Runnybolt, Jack furiously throws a pile of the same newspapers onto Beatrice's table. He is interested in the origin of many articles in this newspaper, whose author is surely Beatrice. The young woman looks severely at the mage. She does not hide her authorship at all, but on the contrary, seems proud of it. A very small Beatrice stands in front of her family. All relatives praise her. They call her the best girl in the world. The young woman was born into a family of aristocrats, where she was pampered and cared for. Since childhood, she was talented in everything. Being the best was natural for her, but she lived like a frog in a well, and when she faced someone stronger, she could not resist. That fateful encounter shattered all her convictions of invincibility. The strong man even refused to fight her. Beatrice took it as an insult. The strength of Liana, looming over Beatrice, was tens of times greater than the strength of her previous opponents. Beatrice sat helplessly on her knees in front of the young woman and could not utter a word due to the anger gnawing at her inside. Someone greatly surpasses her in power. Beatrice will not tolerate it. Liana fixed her gaze on the girl. The articles defame the saint because of the watermelon. They say she launders money with it. Beatrice denies everything. Jack does not believe her. He knows how hard Beatrice tries to collect watermelons across the continent to inflate their price. Beatrice listens to his arguments calmly, drinking red wine from a tall glass. Jack tries to get her attention, and he succeeds when he mentions Chroma, who sent a letter asking not to bother the saint. The glass shatters in Beatrice's hand from the force. She gets enraged and orders Jack to shut up and never mention Chroma again. The name of that traitor irritates her. Jack also likes the saint, but at least he stayed in Runnebolt. That is why Beatriz is more lenient with him. The girl shows her ring and reminds the man who holds the power. Wine mixed with blood runs down her hand. Beatriz is now the owner of Runnebolt, and Jack must follow her rules and have no complaints against her. And if he does have them, Beatriz will agree to talk to him. After taking care of that mountain of documents, the girl looms furiously over Jack, who refuses to do the work. He is not used to thinking. He always solves everything with his beauty. Beatriz is nervous and starts biting her nails. Jack, acting like Chromo, watches her attentively. The man decides not to bother the already angry Beatriz and gets down to work. There are piles of paperwork accumulated. He does not doubt Chromo's abilities. He knows that he will protect the saint, but he is worried about the changes in his queen's character. Everything the newspapers say is a fraud, but Beatriz's plan is working. The melon has become expensive. They even steal it from the temple. There are no more melons even at George's house, so the saint will have to settle for other fruits until the situation changes. The girl doesn't like it at all, but she can't do anything about it and starts devouring other fruits. Equally nutritious, suddenly something occurs to the girl, and with a radiant face, she lunges at George's neck. She asks him why little George knows so much about the melon news, and the temple reserves if this fruit is indifferent to him. The girl realizes she is right when George tenses under her hands and tries to shake her off. He is going to buy melon, so the saint doesn't get too angry about his absence. She knows it and provokes him on purpose. The girl was right. Jorge cannot deny it and tries to escape, but he cannot shake off the saint either. In the middle of the attack, the girl sees Chromo approaching and asks him to help her stop Jorge. But Chromo pulls the saint off the boy. She is indignant. She only wanted to have fun with him. Chromo doesn't listen to her, and Jorge runs away as fast as he can. The boy is red as a tomato, super embarrassed. But the saint wants to catch up to him. It terrifies Jorge, and he runs away, pretending to be sick. The saint doesn't understand anything. She asks Chromo to let her go, but he doesn't move and only tells her they need to talk. He calls her by her real name. Liana tenses up and prepares for a serious conversation. Chromo and the saint discuss the false articles that are spreading rapidly among the people, and they are only the beginning of the problems. The accusations against the Holy Father and the saint are growing. If this continues, donations to the temple will cease. Donations are the temple's main income. And if people stop donating money, the temple will go bankrupt. From the signature in the newspaper, the saint recognizes Beatriz's authorship. She praises her for her ingenious way of dealing with the enemy. In her place, the past Liana would have acted the same, as she herself taught Beatriz to defeat the enemy by all possible means. But now everything has changed a little. Now she personally knows all the temple inhabitants. She cares about them and will not allow such humiliation. The saint's spirits improve. She knows for sure how to solve this problem and asks Crom to gather people for a counterattack. The saint dreams of her death. The girl coughs blood. She dies poisoned. She hears a voice mocking her. It is her death in one of her past lives, in which she was an artist and could aspire to the title of genius of the century. That life was miserable, but Liana lived it happily, as she had her paintings and a dear friend. She wished for nothing more to be happy, but the dear friend turned out to be terribly envious. She killed Liana to take her place. At that moment, Liana could not understand her motives and was shocked by the actions of her best friend. But that girl was ruthless. She cruelly killed Liana because she herself wanted to become the art genius of the century. And Liana was just an obstacle in her way. The saint wakes up amidst tears of terror, just as her memories abandon her at the moment of her death. Chrome has been next to the sleeping girl the whole time and knew instantly that she was dreaming about her past life again. Whenever she dreams of her past lives, she cries in her sleep and then, upon waking, laments in solitude so as not to bother anyone. Chrome brought the exhausted Liana warm milk so she would calm down faster, and she could fall into a deep sleep. Tomorrow is an important day for the girl. She must face Beatriz, and upon remembering it, she visibly tenses up. She doesn't see anything strange in Beatriz's behavior, as in this situation, it is understandable that she thinks that Chrome and Liana abandoned her. Chrome still thinks she is wrong, but Liana, on the contrary, praises her for her strategic thinking and her peculiar way of eliminating the enemy. Remembering Beatriz, Liana finds parallels between her behavior and that of her former best friend. They are astonishingly similar. Remembering that saddens her, as that friend murdered her, and it is very possible that Beatriz will do exactly the same. In none of her lives has she died peacefully. Someone has always killed her, and she fears that this time her murderer will be Beatriz. Early, a group of reporters from various kingdoms arrives at the Asperia temple, discussing rumors of bankruptcy threatening the temple. There are already bad comments about the saint, so the reporters enter the temple cautiously, expecting to see a little devil. But their eyes open in astonishment when the door suddenly opens and a bright light from the saint's face illuminates them. The saint appears to them as the incarnation of the goddess Asperia, sitting peacefully in a chair in the middle of the hall. Thanking the reporters for their journey, she seems to cast a spell on them with her sweet words. The men fight with all their might not to succumb to her charms, but they do not succeed. A light pierces their hearts. The saint's beauty and her eloquence help her achieve what she wants. Although the help of divine powers is crucial, everything is going according to plan. The men are delighted with the young woman. The saint contacted the newspaper so that people would know the falsehood of the articles. She tries to change the reporter's point of view so that they publish good news about her. They start asking her about the melon articles. Baman was going to answer for her, but the young woman stops him. She wants to solve everything alone. The young woman describes herself as an ignorant child who still has much to learn, trying to win over the reporters. Melon, as far as she remembers, was always a useless fruit, thrown around like trash. But she always loved it. But if loving melon is a crime, she pleads guilty. The reporters are stunned by her words. They wanted to know if the saint was using melons to profit, but they failed. They got no answer, and then George appeared. The reporters' attention immediately focused on him. The boy informed the saint of his return from the territorial patrol. The men began to loudly comment on his victory in the first tournament and the subsequent ones. They believe the boy deserves his position. Suddenly, they fall silent and listen as the saint officially thanks George, who, somewhat confused, kneels before her. The girl begins to praise George's kindness, and he, in turn, carefully praises the saint in front of the reporters. He swears eternal loyalty to her. The men have no idea that this scene is being staged by the saint and George on purpose for them. The boy is finding it terribly difficult. The saint enjoys the show and hopes that, upon returning, every reporter will write a retraction to the previous articles. She expected the articles to restore her dignity in the eyes of society. But instead, she received another fake article about her romance with George. Everything got worse. It will be almost impossible to convince people, and the temple will lose income. The saint's plans fell apart. The saint, furious, destroys the newspaper and curses Beatriz, sure she is behind this. If the real articles had come out, Beatriz's plan would have been ruined. But she bought the newspapers and prevented it. In those articles, the saint looked very dignified. The reporters highlighted her charisma, strength, and sincerity. To Jack, this description of bearing and charisma reminded him of Lion, who always stood out for these qualities. Beatriz asks if he is talking about the queen, and upon confirming, she throws herself at him and scolds him for comparing the enemy like that. Jack darkens. He knows who the saint is, but he cannot tell her. He would never break the promise he made to Lion. He asks if her words matter to her, hoping they do, but he does not get the answer he wants. Beatriz clenches her fists in anger. The similarity bothers her, but she already has an explanation and does not doubt it. For her, the evil saint tricked Chroma and extracted information about Lion from him to compare herself with her. In Liana's absence, Beatriz must be the best. And thinking about it, she gets enraged again, and a new brilliant plan emerges in her mind. Maria went to the saint's room to comb her hair before sleep, and noticed how deeply she sighed. The saint wonders if she is really a messenger, the incarnation of the goddess, or if it's all a mistake, and she is just a normal girl. Maria is surprised by her statement and asks the girl again, trying to make sure she heard correctly. The saint recalls the articles criticizing and accusing her of lying. Articles that are harming the temple. They call her a false saint. Donations are decreasing. If she hadn't reincarnated in this body, none of this would have happened. Maria, after hearing the saint's concerns, starts to laugh softly, which greatly outrages the girl. Maria reminds the saint of her nightly sessions, reading the newspaper. The girl tried to learn to respond cleverly to malicious questions. Not only Maria knows about these efforts of the saint, but also all the other temple servants. Maria asks the girl not to worry, because, whatever the rumors, the temple servants appreciate her very much, and they will always be on her side. The girl becomes very embarrassed by these words, blushes, and modestly thanks the impassive woman. Maria continues with her business. In none of her reincarnations did Liana receive paternal love. No one ever cared about her, and only Maria with the master could give her that love. In her previous reincarnation, Liana tried so hard to learn magic and become strong like the master that she even got sick. She longed to gain his recognition and learn forbidden magic. Liana incessantly asked how to gather as much magical power as the master. The man repeatedly stated that there were only two ways to gain power. The girl remembers it perfectly. The first consisted of seeking knowledge on her own and concentrating it in her body. But the master never told her about the second one. He wouldn't tell her this time either. The girl was supposed to discover that method on her own someday. The second method is probably the transfer of magical powers from one person, in case of death, to another. Liana remembers how she took the powers of the dead master. And again, she draws a parallel between this situation and Beatriz, who wants to kill her, or even killed her in the previous reincarnation. Faced with such a gruesome thought, the saint wakes up suddenly, covered in a cold sweat. Her eyes open enormously in horror, but her abrupt and unpleasant awakening is not just because of a nightmare. It is Omar who startles her with screams. He tells the saint about an aristocrat who arrived in the morning and plans to make a huge donation. Her dream vanishes instantly. The saint doubts the sincerity of the aristocrat, but her donation, according to Bauman, seeks to support the saint's love, described in a recent article. The aristocrat wants to spend time with the saint. Bauman and Omar beg her to smile at her to make a good impression and get more money. The saint, who does not believe in love, receives a donation in the name of love. Even after those offensive articles, the irony is palpable. She reflects on the dreams that torment her due to stress and decides to solve the financial problem so as not to worry about at least that. The saint decides to meet the aristocrat. Her family was famous even before the fall of the great empire. Suddenly, the girl hears a terribly familiar voice. Her soul almost escapes her body. Everything starts spinning before the girl's eyes when that voice addresses her with a new name and thanks her for the opportunity to meet her. In front of her is Beatrice of the Graham lineage. She pretends to be innocent perfectly. It is impossible to see her true nature beneath that dress. Beatrice casts a furious look at the saint and thanks her for the audience, with anger shining in her eyes. The saint in front of her smiles nervously and cannot move. The situation is absurd, amusing, and terrifying at the same time. The dreams that tormented her for so long actually turned out to be prophetic dreams. The Graham family ceased to exist during the fall of the empire and the start of the war. Omar is amazed by the appearance of a survivor from this lineage. The saint is not surprised by this at all, as she knows about Beatrice's immortality and the way she managed to survive. Just like Crome, who came to the holy capital of Hesperia, Beatrice completely hid her magical power to discreetly get rid of the saint. But she will not be able to endanger the girl, since the paladins are guarding the temple day and night and will quickly notice any trouble. The saint's face darkens at these thoughts. Beatrice herself cannot ignore the high level of temple protection. In this case, the purpose of her visit remains an unsolved mystery for the saint. Beatrice notices the darkness on the girl's thoughtful face. She asks if the saint is angry with her, pulling the girl out of her deep reflections. Beatrice, feigning distress, pretends to understand the saint's poor reception of her unexpected visit and prepares to leave the temple with her offerings. The saint cannot allow that. The temple is in no condition to refuse material aid, let alone speak of it. She strongly desires to throw Beatrice out, but restrains herself and goes against her pride for the money. The saint is intrigued to know why Beatrice is acting this way. She appears happy and smiles kindly at Beatrice. She has no choice but to invite Beatrice to the temple, wish her a pleasant stay, all with an impassive face. After these words, Beatrice, in the saint's eyes, transformed into a hideous monster smiling maliciously, enjoying her victory. The saint, from the capital of Holy Hesperia, who is said to possess an appearance full of holiness, nobility, and charisma. In reality, this saint is just a cheap copy of Liana. Beatrice plans to break her soul little by little and then murder her. First, she wants to crush her pride and publish articles about how the girl degraded herself for money, a harsh blow to her reputation. As a sign of their first meeting, Beatrice wants to give the saint a small gift as a friendly gesture. But this gift is actually small, although the chest looks large and luxurious. Inside, there is only a handful of coins. Beatrice wants to embarrass the saint, who surely expects to see a chest full of money. to see her reaction to the half-empty chest. The servants notice the weight of the chest when lifting it, but do not manage to react when the lock breaks, and its contents fall to the floor. The saint's eyes open enormously when a pile of various treasures spills onto the floor. Right at her feet, Beatrice gets scared. She did not expect to see such a pile of coins. The chest was supposed to disgust the saint, but it surely only made her happy. There are so many precious gems that they would be enough to fill the entire pantry with money. And besides this chest, there are many more, full of gold. The saint thanks Beatrice for the generous gift and points out that it was surely prepared by someone who knows her well. Beatrice starts to justify herself, shields herself behind an invented younger brother who is supposedly obsessed with the saint. She says that the saint will surely refuse such a generous gift. But the girl cleverly responds and decides to keep all the gifts. The young woman gets enraged. She remembers how all those jewels got into the chest. Jack Casanova put them there the night before leaving. He personally asked Beatrice to deliver his gift to the saint. He even wanted to go to Hesperia, but Beatrice did not allow it. Jack is the only one who can fill the void in Runnebolt, while Beatrice and Chroma are absent. With spiritual power and transformation, she was going to refuse to hand over the gifts, but Jack insists it is an official request. As a disaster mage, he begs her to deliver his gift. Beatrice looks at him condescendingly. It distracts her from her preparations. Beatrice agreed, as she believed Jack would not prepare anything valuable, but she decides to ask him why he is interested in the saint. Jack always loved Liana, and his feelings have not changed. But Liana has never loved him. Jack doesn't care much. It is enough for him to be able to show his feelings. Liana will never be able to love him. Jack knew it from their first encounter. She started beating him brutally, using fire magic. The forest was in danger. The fire was getting out of control. Jack begged her to stop. Normal people don't attack anyone who crosses their path. After his words, Liana seemed to awaken. She looked at Jack with clear eyes and asked who he was. During the entire fight, the girl saw him as the emperor and was horribly scared when she found a mere human at her feet. Remembering this, Jack smiles foolishly and begins to justify his new infatuation. The heart cannot be commanded. In the end, a small present, delivered by the saint's devoted fan, Jack, got Beatrice into a terrible mess and almost ruined her plans. But Liana always taught Beatrice not to give up and to use any means to defeat the opponent. She demonstrates this with chess. If there are no means to fight, Liana advises pressing the opponent's weak points. Attack their pride. When such blows to self-esteem accumulate, the opponent will gradually start losing faith in themselves, and then they will fall at Beatrice's feet. Beatrice listens to her attentively and asks what to do if even that method does not lead to victory. Nervously, she starts biting her nails again, because even in chess, which she dominated on the last day, the opponent can beat her. Liana moves Beatrice's hand away from her face. She asks her not to complicate things, but the girl remains worried about possible defeats. Liana promises that even if a chess genius crosses paths with Beatrice, they won't be able to beat her, because no one is smarter than Liana in this game, and she was the one who taught Beatrice how to play chess. Therefore, there should be no one Beatrice cannot defeat. That is why the defeat during the saint's visit impacts her so much. A small child beat her. The saint sits proudly in the chair, opposite an astonished Beatrice. She proposed the match to her and does not regret it at all. At first, Beatrice happily accepted the idea of playing a match. She thought it would be the perfect opportunity to show off her skills. However, the saint turned out to be better than her in absolutely everything: chess, drawing, even singing. During this time, Beatrice has not only failed to crush the saint's pride, but also, on the contrary, she has helped her gain even more respect from believers. And chess was always the game in which Liana was the best in the world. Now, the saint seems to mock Beatrice, imitating her deceased queen in everything. Beatrice perceives this senseless copy of her teacher, Liana, as a personal insult. At this rate, Beatrice runs the risk of failing and returning to Runnebolt with nothing. She decides to try another plan. The girl stopped a couple of servants in the hallway and asked for a moment. She was going to offer them some very special sweets. A few hours later, the saint was preparing to sleep, collapsing exhausted on her bedroom bed. The girl sighed deeply, puzzling the nearby Chrome. She had destroyed Beatrice, but she was not satisfied. Her victories don't matter. They cannot change the fake news, nor the prices of melons, nor anything. They are useless. The girl asks Crom why he didn't reveal the truth about her true nature to Beatrice all this time. the man decides to finish the bedtime preparations first. It's already late, and those conversations can take a long time. A lot of time has passed since the man settled in the temple. He had countless opportunities to tell Beatriz everything. Nothing prevented him from sending the information in a letter. If Crom had written to her, the temple would not be in this situation. But Crom tried to send a letter to Beatriz, but she didn't take it seriously. She dismissed the story in the letter as absurd. Crom never received a reply to his letter, which cut off all possibility of contact, resulting in this terrible situation. Not even Liana herself would dare to tell Beatriz the truth after this. But she cannot remain silent watching the temple fall apart. Crom unexpectedly devises a way to protect the temple from Beatriz. The saint cheers up and becomes interested in his ideas. Crom proposes that she return to the world as Liana and personally convince Beatriz. If the saint returns to her body in Runnebolt, she can regain her original power. Thus, she would not have to keep acting as the saint, and the temple would stop being in danger. The idea seems very tempting to Liana. She wants to return to Runnebolt, but she cannot leave the temple to its fate. Crom takes her hand and she shudders. He doesn't want to lose her for the temple. The temple needs her as much as the inhabitants of Runnebolt do. And Crom needs her too. He misses Liana a lot. He squeezes her hand tighter, carried away by emotion. Her family is in Runnebolt, among the Calamity Mages. Not here in the temple, not in Holy Asperia. Crom asks her not to forget him. Memories of the days they spent together flood his thoughts. The girl looks at him as if, for a second, she is also returning to her past life and reliving those wonderful days. She is about to answer Crom, but a sharp knock on the door interrupts her. Neither the saint nor Crom expected it. They both approach the door and ask who is outside, since it is late, and normally no one visits the saint at this hour. A loud voice, Beatriz, is heard from the other side. The saint recognizes her instantly. She apologizes for the late visit and asks them to open up. Beatriz waits behind the door with a tray and tea. She begs the saint for a little of her time, while a malicious smile forms on her face. She found some wonderful tea leaves that she specially prepared for the saint. She must return home tomorrow. That is why she allows herself to arrive so late in the saint's room. She wanted to spend one last moment by her side. It is impossible that a meal brought so suddenly at this hour is normal. The saint perceives a subtle aroma in the tea. Beatriz added a potion to it that Liana once told her about, one that forces one to only tell the truth. The instant a lie escapes the lips of the one who drinks the potion, they feel a sudden pain, weak but unpleasant enough. Beatriz plans this way to discover why the girl is pretending to be Liana and, if necessary, get rid of her. But a doubt remains in her mind. She remembers the days she spent with Liana shortly before her death. Beatriz then prepared tea for her, a normal one, and brought it to Liana's art studio. The girl refused the drink. She tried to lie by saying she didn't like tea, but Beatriz noticed how her hands were trembling. Now she hopes the saint won't imitate the queen, not even in something so small, and that she will drink her concoction. However, upon seeing the tea, Liana panics. She tries to think clearly, but fear is stronger. The person who poisoned her in a past life and Beatriz are completely different people. And the concoction in the tea is not a deadly poison. But remembering her friend and her wide smile during the cruel murder, Liana compares her to Beatriz. And she begins to doubt. She doesn't know what will happen if Beatriz really decides to kill her. The girl pressures the saint, and Liana can't take it anymore. When Beatriz starts insisting, she loses control and gets terribly angry. Unable to control herself, Liana threw the cup and saucer onto the floor, shattering them. The tea spilled across the floor. Beatriz erupted in fury. She didn't expect such an accurate imitation of the queen. The young woman froze, unable to express her emotions. Liana also froze, trying to understand her mistake. Sweat began to run down her tense face. The girl started apologizing to Beatriz, but it was too late. The young woman got up from the chair and looked down at the saint. Beatriz began to insult the saint, calling her a disgusting fake, a miserable imitation. Her fury ignited like a green flame. The young woman lunged, raised her hand towards the saint, and prepared to hit her with magical force. The saint stepped back, but suddenly, Crom appeared in front of the girl, heroically protecting her with his own powers. Crom struggled greatly to contain Beatriz's attack. She had accumulated too much mana. She couldn't have become that strong in just a few years. Crom realized that Beatriz's mana was contained in the necklace that the young woman touched so often. She couldn't have come without preparing. In this situation, Crom is at a disadvantage. He knows it and shouts at the saint to step aside. A ray of magical power strikes the man. Liana flies out, and Crom is left at the back of the room. With her power, Beatriz lifts him into the air. She grips him by the neck, preventing Crom from inhaling or exhaling. Her first impulse is to get rid of him. She already celebrates her future victory, but something distracts her. She decides to deal with the cause of her appearance first. The saint tries to hide her tension. If Beatriz keeps causing a ruckus, a squad of paladins will enter. That reassured the saint, but Beatriz called her naive. She put the paladins to sleep. They all took the sleeping pills the girl gave them. The saint didn't expect something like that. Beatriz is strong, but almost defenseless against so many enemies. So she decided to use a cunning plan and invited everyone to candies with sleeping pills. Due to their naivety, everyone in the temple gladly accepted her candies, which convinced Beatriz of their stupidity and innocence. Thanks to this, the girl can now easily finish off the saint without witnesses. She pounces on her, ready to strike. But her strength does not reach the saint. A much more powerful holy force stops her. Beatriz is perplexed. The girl is actually a saint. Beatriz cannot believe it. The saint looks at her seriously. Magical power and holy power are opposites. But to be precise, holy power is superior. Liana always taught Beatriz that. They fought against holy Asperia, where many possessed holy power. Defeating priests is difficult without powerful magic. That is why Liana asked Beatriz to flee if she saw them. She cared about her and promised to punish anyone who opposed Beatriz. The girl never forgot it. Now, the slightest touch on the saint's shield causes her immense pain. Her energy far surpasses hers. Beatriz understood after the first few blows. The girl was so strong that she couldn't even scratch her with all her magic. Rage flooded her. Sweat ran down her face. The saint was undoubtedly authentic. There was no doubt that she was genuine. Even with a simple look, the intense glow around her could be seen. But Beatriz would not tolerate the insolence of that girl. The saint must not imitate the enemy queen and offend her. Beatriz tried to attack the child again, but the saint didn't even flinch at her powerful blow. She longed to unleash all her holy power in one blow, to bring Beatriz down once and for all. But if she did, Crom could also get hurt. So the only thing the saint can do now is defend herself. However, Beatriz's very active pressure could lead to the young woman suffering the consequences. The saint is hesitating. She cannot believe that Beatriz truly wants to get rid of her so intensely. Beatriz probably didn't want to harm the saint. Her visit to the capital was surely intended to provoke her. If she had wanted to kill the girl from the start, she would have put poison in the tea instead of the truth serum. But now Beatriz has lost the ability to think rationally and launches the attack. It is unclear what unbalanced her. The young woman's pendant broke. Her hands were shaking from the blows. The pain ran through her. Beatriz could no longer stand up. Crom tried to reason with her. He begged her to stop the fight, as she could get hurt. But Beatriz silenced him with a shout and called him a traitor. She couldn't let the saint live, because in her opinion, she had gravely offended Liana. And she did not deserve to live. A brat unworthy of even the queen's little finger dares to copy her. And on top of that, being Liana's enemy, the saint herself. Beatriz plans to get rid of her and raise the holy capital, do what Liana couldn't do. Her hands weaken. She can no longer attack, and only murmurs about her desire to gain Liana's recognition. The girl's head falls down. She can no longer even hold it up. She is now completely powerless. However, the saint does not try to stop or attack her. She looks at Beatriz with surprise and waits to see what she says next. Beatriz thinks that, in the end, death awaits her, and she couldn't even kill the saint, nor meet Liana again. Unexpectedly for the girl, the saint begins to apologize for the pain caused. She kneels and takes Beatriz's hands in hers. Beatriz asks her to repeat, but the saint keeps apologizing. She regrets not being able to convey anything to the girl, and that she had to suffer so much. Beatriz only wanted to gain recognition. That is why she waited for Liana for so long. That is why she went to Asperia to murder the saint. But the girl had no idea of Liana's rebirth in that body. She only suspected it from the saint's words while cleaning up the spilled tea. Liana and Beatriz chat about one of their past lives. Liana was poisoned with tea. That's why Liana doesn't accept tea from anyone. That's why she threw Beatriz's tray and now feels terrible. She starts apologizing to Beatriz, but the girl interrupts her again by taking her hand. Liana has no reason to apologize. Beatriz believes her doubt is natural. She accepts and understands Liana's actions. Liana helped the broken and desperate Beatriz to get up again. The girl cannot be angry with her. She promises not to hate Liana, even if she doubts her. She asks her not to blame herself for anything. Someone who showed Beatriz how special she was, instead of being obsessed with being the best. Liana removes Beatriz's gloves and becomes sad seeing that she is still biting her nails out of nervousness. At that moment, Beatriz recognizes her queen in the saint, the girl who helped her become herself. That same morning, Beatriz promises to normalize the price of melons and adjust everything else. She controls many publishing houses now. Liana notices this with her eyes swollen from nighttime tears. She scolds Beatriz for forgetting the cold compress. Liana doesn't keep this problem a secret. She and Beatriz are frank even in front of priests. They are not listened to anyway. Now Beatriz understands how Jack tried to hint to her about Liana's reincarnation as the saint. But she didn't understand his hints. She expected to find a cheap copy of Liana, not the real one. Upon arriving in Asperia, the saint asks Beatriz to smack Jack for not telling her directly about the reincarnated queen. But she refuses. Jack feared revealing her because of the loose murderer. Upon hearing this, the saint remembers that she suspected Beatriz and starts apologizing. But the girl interrupts her again. Excessive distrust is not the saint's fault. External factors forced her. Therefore, Beatriz rejects the apologies, both for the previous night and for the past suspicions. The saint looks at her with gratitude and love, accepts her friend's words, and vows never to behave like that again. The saint revealed her true identity to Beatriz the night before, finally unraveling the tangle of misunderstandings. She was apologizing desperately so that Beatriz would not hate her. But the girl unexpectedly pulled her close and started hugging her. Beatriz kept crying and calling Liana, hugging the girl tighter and tighter. The old Liana would have instantly told her to stop crying, but now she only comforted her. And at one point, she herself burst into tears. After the girls let off steam, Chrome and Beatriz rebuilt the destroyed room, arguing nonstop during the process. And the saint, meanwhile, ran through the entire temple, erasing the servants' memories of that night, so they wouldn't suspect anything in the morning. In the end, they worked hard all night, but the saint found the time spent with her friends very enjoyable. The saint told Beatriz her plans. She wanted to wait until adulthood to obtain the forbidden magic. Beatriz didn't like the idea much. However, she has no choice but to accept Liana's will and return home. The girl wishes for the queen to grow up soon and get what she wants. Until her return, Beatriz swears to protect the temple and not leave it without reason again. Hinting at Chrome's behavior with these words, the girls mock the man's irresponsibility and laugh even more when Beatriz remembers the inept Jack. Beatriz receives Liana's recognition. The girl takes control. Liana's words dispel all her anger. She thanks the saint for the time she spent with her. For her, it was like a blessing. Beatriz wishes the girl the best. Liana and Crom listen with interest to her farewell speech. Beatriz smiles radiantly. She wishes the saint good health upon her farewell and, radiant with happiness, leaves the temple. Shortly after Beatriz left, the issue of the fake articles was resolved. As if they had never existed, peace returned to the holy capital, and the saint began to study history. The lesson was taught by Bachman himself, who enthusiastically told her about the division of the empire into 4 kingdoms. The classes seemed terribly boring to her. She got distracted the whole time and couldn't concentrate in any way. She herself is practically an encyclopedia of history, and they repeat to her for hours what she already knows. Meanwhile, the young Jorg listens attentively to all these boring stories, as he knows practically nothing about the history course. Liana watches him every time and admires his perseverance. He reminds her a lot of George II. Genes don't lie. After class, the girl confirms that George is genuinely interested in all activities. The conversation bores her, and she decides to go see Chrome. But today, she hasn't seen Chrome even once. It's as if he vanished. George says that Chrome took a temporary vacation, which surprises the saint very much. If Chrome needed to be absent, he always notified her. But this time, he didn't even mention his departure. Apparently, the matter was very urgent. The saint wonders where he could have gone so quickly. The man headed to Runnebolt, where a meeting of old comrades was already waiting for him. The faces of each of them expressed immense, somber seriousness. Some calamity mages were not present in person, but communicated remotely. Chrome formally thanked everyone present and invited them to start the meeting. And listen to the reports. The Magic Council of Runnebolt is a gathering of sorcerers in which only Liana can participate, and the 6 disasters. But after Liana's death, the purpose of the meeting changed. Now, in Runnebolt, Even those disasters who left the kingdom long ago gather. When the disasters give way to reports, Jack opens fire, praising her celestial beauty, which only improves with the years. After him, Beatrice recounts how she learned to sign documents with both hands. And then, an anonymous mage boasts about his business achievements. Everyone talks about nonsense, and that exasperates Chromo, who doesn't hold back and is already shouting at the mages. The meetings after Liana's death seek the culprit, but instead of clues, the mages debate trivialities. Chromo is furious, lectures the mages, but Jack interrupts him, as everything seems useless to him. They have been searching for the murderer for 60 years, but haven't even found a clue. The result of the meetings is always the same, and everyone is fed up. The cause of Liana's death is unknown. When the mages found her, she was already dead. That day, all the mages felt their incompetence. They couldn't even protect their own queen. There was no trace of intruders. Someone entered using magical powers, much more powerful than those of all the mages, but there is no mage stronger than Liana. And if we add everything up, we arrive at a very interesting conclusion that Jack points out. Among the Calamity mages, there is a traitor who murdered the queen 60 years ago and remains undiscovered. During the debate, the mages return to the beginning. They have nothing, not even facts, not even conjectures. Chrome once hoped that all mages would be united by the desire to fulfill Liana's longing. But it turns out there is someone who betrayed her and the mages. The meeting ended, and Chrome returned to his office, where an unpleasant surprise awaited him. A mess on his desk with documents. This infuriated him terribly. Beatrice was embarrassed by Jack's behavior, which caused this chaos on the desk. Jack began to apologize unconvincingly. Beatrice justifies herself. Many cases have really accumulated, and only Chrome knows how to handle them correctly. Jack cannot be trusted at all. Jack responds by boasting about a beautiful paper swan he made and left on the table. This also gets on Beatrice's nerves. Chrome tries to calm his friends and, with an impassive face, sits down to review the documents, which are scribbled and already illegible. Jack and Beatrice ask why he is behaving so strangely and decide it's because of today's meeting. They start laughing at Chrome. They try to make him laugh, but he sits with a poker face and reflects on something important, known only to him. Beatrice notices that this meeting is different from the previous ones. This time all three know about Liana's reincarnation. That must be the cause of Chrome's restlessness, as he starts laughing louder. Chrome's head is full of Liana. That amuses him. Chrome does not respond to his friends, snaps his fingers, and magically removes them from the office, closing the door behind them. He is truly very worried. He does not want to face the loss of Liana again, not even one more time. That is why Chrome must return the girl to Runnebolt as soon as possible. But remembering her reaction to that proposal, Chrome thinks twice. The girl said she didn't want to leave Asperia, as she was surrounded by love and care there. And besides, somewhere the forbidden magic lies. But the Calamity mages must find Liana's murderer before she grows up, and before the murderer finds her. Chrome leaves those thoughts for later. First, he must deal with the mountain of documents before him. If George II were in Runnebolt, he would quickly handle the documents. He was excellent with those kinds of duties, but he hasn't attended any meetings, and for a long time he has disappeared from the radar of the Calamity mages. His post has been vacant for a long time. No one has seen the man since Liana's death. The news of the girl's passing affected him too much. Chrome doesn't even know if he is still alive. These thoughts worry him, but they are not that important, so he returns to the documents. Almost at the same time, the saint is in history class. She is informed of the imminent pilgrimage to the Holy Land. The girl is very surprised. Bachman, with a brilliant smile, announces that the saint must go to a small town with a holy spring. Esplanade, he has spoken of it several times in class. They inspire her greatly, but the saint is not infected by his enthusiasm at all. The saint doesn't listen to him in class and doesn't remember anything about that city. The appearance of an unknown man saves her from the insistent Bachman. It is a paladin from Esplanade named Yosef. He is very happy to finally meet the saint in person. The man has been entrusted with protecting the saint during the pilgrimage to the Holy Land this year, and he assures the girl of his loyalty. He tells her that before her, other saints descended to earth, including the very first one. The saint of all beginnings, Galatea, was the first to settle in Esplanade, and there, after a long journey, she ended her life. That is why the current saint must go to Esplanade. She has to see the lands where the first saint lived. The saint sees no point in using such a grandiose word as pilgrimage for a trip to the neighboring city. But the journey to Esplanade, according to Joseph, will take about 15 days, and at the saint's pace, it could take 30. To cover that distance, remembering her life, that is a pilgrimage, but the saint does not like the idea. She wants to go by carriage. Joseph asks her not to worry about the difficulties, as George will accompany her. But the saint objects, George is as young as she is. The girl does not understand why she has to go through those difficulties. She really doesn't like the idea of the trip, partly because while the saint was saving the world, Liana died again and again in an endless cycle of reincarnations. There were even times when Liana died before letting out her first cry. It's a miracle she hasn't gone crazy. The girl resents the gods for giving her that life and doesn't understand their desire to guide her through the goddess's steps in this reincarnation. Joseph tries to get her interested in the trip. He knows something about the forbidden magic that the saint is so passionate about. In Esplanade, records of forbidden magic are kept, and this fact truly awakens Liana's interest. The girl begins to question Joseph and discovers that records of absolutely everything that happened in the empire are kept in the city. And after the war, in the kingdoms. In Esplanade, there are records of Galatia's biography, of the birth of Holy Asperia, and of course, the history of forbidden magic. The saint decides to ask Bachman if this is true, to which she receives an affirmative answer, and she starts scolding the man. Bachman could have told her about the records, and even directly shown her the forbidden magic. But to all her arguments, he responds with just one. The girl is still too young. The saint will not be able to convince this stubborn man, and searching for magic in the capital is useless. She has already searched every corner. She has no choice but to cling to the thread leading to the forbidden magic. So the saint accepts the pilgrimage. She was so excited by the idea of finding information about forbidden magic that she immediately ran to pack her bags and urged everyone to start preparing immediately as well. Georg ran after the fleeing girl, but had to stop abruptly when Joseph addressed him by his old name, Luke. But that is no longer the boy's name. He inherited the titular name of the family, Georg. Joseph realizes his mistake and apologizes to Georg. An eternity has passed since their last meeting, so Joseph proposes to talk to the boy. He is his uncle. Georg has grown a lot since the last time. Joseph has heard that his nephew enjoys the saint's favor. Georg becomes modest. He says they exaggerate his achievements, but Joseph disagrees and continues to praise him. Joseph decides to get straight to the point. He believes the pilgrimage is a golden opportunity for Georg, especially without Chrome involved. The Georg family once held immense power, but Georg II stained their name. Their honor and glory were shattered. But now, with the birth of the saint, the Georg family has a new opportunity to restore their honor and glory. Joseph tries to convince Georg to marry the saint. That would wash away the family's entire shameful past. Georg wants to refuse. He doesn't like the idea. But Joseph looks at him with fury, and the boy freezes. He doesn't know what to answer. His uncle belittles him. He insists that he must not let the saint finish off Chromo, or someone like that. He applies psychological pressure. Joseph asks Georg not to be timid, and to think of himself and his family, not to forget that he is the hope of his lineage. Georg purses his lips. He knows well how much his clan suffered, because of Georg II and what Uncle Joseph wants, but he doesn't want to use those solutions. It would mean manipulating the saint's feelings. The Georgs have been loyal paladins to the temple for centuries. One member was the husband of Saint Galatea, a family of knight saints with a great reputation. Only the best and bravest deserve the name Georg. The saint searches the temple for young Georg, who does not answer her call. Georg and Joseph Laban. The uncle pressures Georg further. He asks him to go to the girl quickly. He puts his hand on his shoulder, calls him the family's last hope. Georg becomes discouraged by this. Georg goes to the saint after staining the family honor. The name Georg is a yoke and a burden. Bachman insists that she will go on foot, but the saint clearly sees a carriage in front of her. They lied to her about the 30-day walk. Furious, she attacks the Holy Father and hits him again. Maria appears and explains the situation to the girl. She and Bachman begged for mercy. The saint is too young for such expeditions. The saint thanks Maria. She remembers that Esplanade is Georg's hometown. And when Georg approaches, she asks him why he didn't tell her. The boy excuses himself without much conviction. He informs the saint of his imminent departure and leaves, leaving a bitter taste in the saint's mood. The girl begins to suspect something strange. Georg's way of speaking has changed, as if he has distanced himself. Something has happened that the saint is unaware of. The saint shares her concerns about Jorg with Maria. The woman thinks the boy is so nervous because he hasn't been home in a long time. The saint scorns him for that. She is going to Esplanade for the first time, but she is not nervous at all. Maria shares her feelings. She is also going to Esplanade for the first time, which surprises the saint and makes her very ashamed. She is a cleric and must visit the Holy Land at least once. Maria was always a normal girl, and while other clerics were transferred to large temples, she remained in a small one. But Maria was happy. She had family and best friends. She didn't even dream of a trip to the Holy Land. And then, by a happy coincidence, she was transferred to Holy Asperia, where, after a very long time, the woman met the saint. The girl listened enraptured to the woman's story, amazed at the twists of fate in Maria's life, which practically turned her life upside down. The saint understands that Maria, who takes care of her, has never left the holy capital, which means she has never left the temple grounds. Because of these reflections, the girl suggests to Maria that they go on vacation after returning from the trip. This surprises Maria very much. The saint does not want Maria to have difficulties because of her, as allowing the woman to work without giving her a vacation is simply terrible. Maria starts laughing after the girl's words. The saint gets angry about this, as she cannot help but worry about the health of her loved one. But Maria laughs because, among the temple servants, the saint has become the second person to say something like that to Maria. In a place as gloomy and suffocating as the temple, another person who speaks the right words has appeared. The saint asks with interest who it is. Maria timidly replies that her first love was the one who first cared about her rest. The saint's mouth drops wide open in shock, anticipating an interesting story. The saint shouts in admiration, startling Jorg, who is passing outside, and asks Maria to tell her more about that love, which embarrasses her even more. Contrary to the saint's expectations, this person is not Maria's friend, the one she mentioned earlier, but a knight whom the woman remembers with a smile. Maria was 10 years old when the great knights first arrived at her temple. She admired them deeply, and one of them was etched in her memory forever. It was then that they met. The man reminded the girl of a fairy tale prince due to his skills, figure, and appearance. When Maria saw him, a wave of admiration flooded her. She couldn't take her eyes off the knight, and strange feelings began to blossom inside her. But by the time Maria realized it was love, the man had already left the temple, and she never confessed it to him, but she kept her feelings to this day. The saint is surprised to see so much confusion in a woman. The knight she admires must already be a decrepit old man, and Maria still loves him. The girl decides to help Maria reunite with that man. She cannot contain herself and asks who he is. Maria thanks the girl for her kindness, but reuniting with the knight will no longer be possible, because the man left the temple a long time ago, and she doesn't know where he is now. At that very moment, George IV spots something on the road and asks all the goddess's servants to remain alert. The cart stops abruptly. The girls hear George's shout and get very scared. They are very worried about the boy and the other servants. The saint is horrified, thinking about what might have happened outside. The girl doesn't want to lose her 101st life, but her fears were unfounded. Now the saint has to crowd into a small cart next to George, who cannot get out. The reason is a stranger who previously caused the cart's halt. He is the culprit of all ills. Maria, as soon as he was brought onto the cart, forgot about the saint and ran to help the man. To take care of him, the man was found on a mountain path on the way to Esplanade. He was dirty and skinny. No one could help him, so the priests decided to take matters into their own hands. Jorg had to stay inside the cart, because he, as a bodyguard, cannot leave the saint alone with a stranger. They decided to take the man to the city. The saint does not understand how Maria can help such a strange individual. The man regains consciousness at that moment and asks who saved him. Maria introduces herself as a person from the temple, and the man calls her and others like her masters of meddling where they are not called. He clearly does not like the company of the priests. His behavior exasperates the saint. The girl asks him to watch his words and at least not be rude, since he is incapable of showing gratitude. The man infuriates her so much that she decides to heal him with holy power, so that he recovers faster and realizes what he is doing. But the man strikes the girl hard on the hand, which greatly frightens Jorg and Maria. The boy prepares to jump to defend the saint, but the man does nothing else. He only asks the girl not to touch him. The saint's hand is very red from his blow. The saint is in shock and cannot speak. She doesn't like the stranger's behavior. The man no longer listens to her. He just turns silently toward the wall. Then he calls the girl a false saint. The saint gets angry, starts shouting, and only Maria, who arrives in time, prevents her from attacking the man. The girl is outraged by Maria's behavior. The saint's patience has a limit, which the man is about to cross. Maria only has one argument. The stranger is sick, and that is why he behaves this way. He only needs the help of the priests. The saint has nothing to answer him. The girl runs out of the carriage. As soon as she has the opportunity, she opens the door so hard that she doesn't even realize she hits Joseph. She leaves Maria alone with the man, and she wants to go to Esplanade through the forest to arrive before everyone else. Today is a bad day for the girl. Maria is having a hard time because of the stranger, and the saint cannot even help her because the man ignores her. But still, it terribly angers the girl that Maria took the man's side in their argument, and not hers. In reality, it is not surprising that Maria prefers the patient, as she likes to take care of others. She is a very kind person. Suddenly, the saint is called. The girl thinks Maria has reconsidered and finally remembered the most important thing. She turns with her eyes closed and thanks Maria for the attention given, the effort invested in her care. But surprise, it wasn't Maria running after the girl, but Jorg, whom the woman sent to protect the saint. She stayed with the stranger. Maria hadn't seen such whims from the saint in a long time. She needs to help the man. She cannot run after the girl and leave him alone. The woman gets into the cart and asks the man to get up, so she can bandage and treat his wounds. It must hurt terribly. The stranger has all his ribs broken, but he stoically endures the treatment. No one can heal him now. Holy power is dangerous for him. Maria knew this because she felt magical energy in the stranger. She has lived in the temple all her life and knows how to distinguish mages from normal people. The man does not react to these words and only asks what Maria wants in return for the help. She wants him to show his gratitude through actions. The stranger does not want to pay with work. He tries to scare Maria with his status, but for the woman, right now, he is just a patient. Maria understands that the man hates the temple with all his being. He is very stubborn, but she is determined to help him. Her resolution stems, in part, from the man's great resemblance to the knight who saved Maria as a child. The man doesn't believe Maria, and she decides to tell him the story of her childhood. Hold on, this is getting interesting. The story of an ordinary girl, without special talents or abilities out of the ordinary. Completely average. The girl was named Maria at the orphanage. She was like any other child, and her best friend was named Sophia. The girls spent almost all their time together, until one day Sophia disappeared without a trace. She wasn't the first girl to disappear, and Maria knew they wouldn't find her. Rumors about the disappearance of young clerics spread quickly, and the thought of losing Sophia terrified Maria. She hoped her friend had simply gone somewhere, and convinced herself of it when she saw Sophia's silhouette in the forest. Maria ran after the girl, repeating her name nonstop. She was euphoric about her friend's unexpected return. Upon catching up to Sophia, Maria grabbed her hand to stop her. But the girl kept fleeing. What is going on? Everyone is very worried about Sophia. No one knew where she had gone, which is why they assumed she had disappeared. Maria begs her to come home soon, but Sophia turns her head towards Maria, and we discover that the girl has no face, only a black mass in its place. The monster in Sophia's shape emits horrible sounds and moves towards Maria. The girl steps back terrified. The creature loses its human appearance and looms over Maria, extending its enormous clawed hand towards her. It lunges at Maria. The girl cannot dodge it, paralyzed by panic. She is unable to move and braces for the blow. But suddenly, a man emerges from the forest. The light of his sword gives Maria a hope of salvation. That night saved her life. And furthermore, he became Maria's first love, an indelible memory for her. Upon arriving in Esplanade, the saint realizes that all the townspeople are red-haired, and they all greet her with great joy. The saint confuses all the townspeople with members of the Jorg family. She wants to ask her bodyguard, but she mistakes him for a child. The journey from Asperia to Esplanade took 4 days, during which the saint got tired, and the presence of delicious food in this rural area cheered her up greatly. Mountains of delicious food lie before the girl on the table. They wish her a good meal, and the saint begins to eat with delight. Jorg worries about her. He asks her to eat more slowly, so that the girl doesn't get indigestion. Completely unconcerned, the woman approaches Jorg from behind. She hasn't eaten with the boy in a long time, so she begs him to eat well. The woman turns out to be Jorg's mother, whom the boy sincerely thanks. And for the first time in a long time, he truly smiles. The saint is cheered by these changes in the boy's behavior. She has finally managed to relax in the family circle she hadn't seen for a long time. But the saint is happy only until she hears Maria's voice, who sincerely rejoices in the girl's happiness. Following the incident in the cart, the saint is in a cold war with Maria, but unilaterally, the saint doesn't speak to her. The rescued injured man was provided with a place to live on the way to the city, and he was helped. Therefore, after arrival, the saint hasn't seen him even once. But the girl is happy about it. That irritating thorn in her eye has finally disappeared. Now the saint is neck-deep in her own affairs. In the middle of the night, the saint opened her room window and threw a rope made of sheets onto the floor, tablecloths and other fabrics. The rope turned out to be very strong and easily supported the girl's weight. She considers this escape the simplest possible. The records of forbidden magic are right in front of the saint, and this knowledge keeps her awake. The girl, before fleeing, asked Georga's mother about forbidden magic, greatly delighting the woman. Her thirst for knowledge fascinated her. The woman revealed that the records related to forbidden magic are kept in the clock tower library. The saint tried to find out where that tower was, and Mother Georga, delighted, told her everything she knew about it. The tower is in the western part of the Esplanade Forest. The saint went there. The tower rises imposingly above the trees. The girl looks at it with determination. In that tower resides the magic that could end her reincarnations. The saint advances with a firm step and steps on a branch. The crack attracts the attention of a stranger sitting in the forest, near a lake. The man was by the water, washing, shaving, and recalling Maria's stories about the knight who saved her. The man reminded Maria a lot of that night, but the woman didn't care if he really was him or not. The woman only wanted to repay someone for the care she received from the knight in her distant childhood. And that's why Maria asks the man to pay her back in kind. And she proposes to the stranger that he also take care of someone as payment for the help. The man tried to have nothing to do with the temple, but now, because of his nature, he cannot help but reciprocate the help received. He reacts to the saint's footsteps, whose path to the tower passes by his hiding place. The saint is very startled to see the stranger. She has trouble recognizing him due to the dirt no longer being on his face. He appeared on the girl's path at the worst possible time. The man thought he heard the movements of a wild animal. He said it out loud and stood up from the stump where he was sitting. The saint had already heard those words somewhere. The scene, the situation, and the man's voice at that moment seemed very familiar to her. All this made her remember a person she met when she was the queen of misfortune in Runnebolt. The girl projected the words and image of her former acquaintance onto the man, and even noticed a physical resemblance. She had no doubts left. The man was known to her. All the pieces clicked into place. The saint realized it the moment the man looked at her with his stern gaze. She remained awkwardly silent from the shock for a couple of seconds. Observing his slightly changed appearance, she could not believe what her eyes were seeing. Definitely, in front of the girl was George II. There was no doubt. And when the saint expressed her suspicions, he attacked her furiously. George lunged at the girl, immobilizing her against a tree with a brutal blow. He did not want the priests to know his true identity. Because the saint knows his true identity, George cannot let her go. She will surely tell the goddess's servants. He plans to kill her. The girl starts fleeing from the man, but he is not going to let her escape. A stone thrown by the man flies at high speed towards the saint. The girl escapes death by chance. She falls, and the stone hits the trunk of a tree. Its bark begins to crumble into small pieces. The man cannot control his strength. The saint remembered this problem of his thanks to her past life. George wanted to finish off the saint quickly, but the girl complicated everything and began to flee from him. She is very angry about his disrespect. The girl tries to stop the assassination attempt by revealing her status. She wants to say who she really is, but the man doesn't want to listen to her. So the saint opens her mouth to introduce herself as another reincarnation of Liana. But she falls silent, without confessing. What stops her is the promise she made to Chromo the previous night. The sin of wrath asked her not to reveal her identity under any circumstances for security. The girl tried to break that promise. She cannot suspect murder from everyone she knew in her previous life. She doesn't want what happened with Beatriz to repeat itself. And Chromo listens to the girl attentively. He proposes a deal. The girl will reveal her true identity only if Chromo is nearby. Some will celebrate Liana's return, but others will want to kill her. Chrom and Liana know this very well. The saint accepted that oath and now regrets it. Crom is not nearby, and revealing her identity would be useful. The girl cannot defeat George II, nor even escape. The man prepares to strike her in the face, but the saint does not give up. She remembers her holy power and tries to defend herself with it. The man gets distracted, and the saint has a chance to escape, but it is useless. He catches up to her and hits her. As an ex-paladin, George has experience with holy power. It doesn't hurt her. The saint is unconscious in his arms. George II does not want to kill the girl, but he cannot leave alive someone who recognized him. George II, heir paladin to George I's sword, lived as such, faithful to the priests and to their beliefs. He achieved countless feats and would have served Holy Asperia until his death, had it not been for his encounter with Liana. The disappearance of young clerics was attributed to a witch, whom they blamed for all the continent's ills. With these problems and convictions, the people turned to George II, who was supposed to rid the world of the witch with his sword. The battlefield with the witch was terrifying. Her incredible magical power amazed the observers. Two paladins, unable to withstand the witch's horrible power, fled, leaving George II alone against the threat. The men feared meeting death on the battlefield, but George could not take his eyes off the magical power. She felt how the mana grew denser as she approached its source, trying to imagine the appearance of the famous witch. They described her as a horrible sorceress with sharp claws, a hideous monster that devoured children. That's what George expected, but his expectations were frustrated. The appearance of the walking catastrophe was very different from the descriptions. The witch didn't have horrible eyes or sharp claws. In fact, she didn't look like a monster at all. In front of George, there was an ordinary person. The girl noticed the man. She called it a misunderstanding. He seemed very much like a bear to her, and that outraged George. The girl clearly wanted to lower her guard with her appearance, only to attack later and take his life. But George must not fall into that trap. The man began a formal speech towards the girl. He tried to intimidate her with his titles, but Liana didn't react at all. The man's actions didn't even amuse her. George II, in Liana's opinion, talked too much, and she decided to silence him, sending him flying towards the sky with a powerful snap of her fingers. George didn't even have time to react to her actions. He was trying to draw his sword at the moment. Liana's fingers painfully struck his forehead. That day became the moment of Liana and George's first meeting, but it remained only in George's memory. The girl did not remember that encounter. After such a powerful blow, he started having a strange dream, in which the witch was 10 times larger than any normal person. And she scorned George. She called him Little Bear again and sent him flying. And George, at that moment, really felt like a little bear. At that very instant, George woke up screaming. Crowds of people were bustling around him. And as it turned out, he was in a field hospital. The man didn't understand how he got there, until he remembered that the witch threw him so far with her blow that he landed right in the paladin's camp. With this, he remembers the paladins who fled and decides to ask if they have returned to the camp. But the priests take his words as delirium. They justify his strange words with the witch's attack, after which the man's consciousness might have become confused. But Jorg proves them wrong. Jorg saw with his own eyes how the men fled terrified from the battlefield. But the priests do not believe him, since great paladins cannot get scared and flee. They begin to convince the man of the error of his judgments, since all paladins studied the fundamentals. Surely they fought until the end to kill the witch. They force the general opinion onto Jorg. They remind him who the priests really are, that the witch is the culprit of everything, and only the witch. They leave the man alone only after he admits his mistake. They praise him, and Jorg begins to doubt the temple's actions more and more. Aversion is born in him. From that day on, cracks began to appear in Jorg's convictions. They soon completely broke, and the man followed Liana. He tries to understand how the girl would act in his place, and decides that he still needs to kill the saint, because she could reveal his identity if he lets her go. Jorg cannot leave someone who knows about him alive. The man raises his hand and seemingly is about to break the girl's neck, assuring her a painless death. Something unexpected stops his hand, preventing him from striking. The man turns his head furiously. Jack's spirits hold him back. George II is surprised. Jack shouldn't be here now. Loud footsteps echo from the forest. George understands. Someone is running towards him. He jumps aside just in time. Jack's spirits are still holding his hand. A cloud of dust blinds him. In front of George, in a tense stance, Crom appears. Ready to attack, he grips his sword and easily holds the saint. Crom, in Runevilt, quickly helped his companions with the documents. Jack was so inspired that he asked Chrome to stay. Chrome sharply interrupted him. Jack accepted that Chrome could not stay. Protecting the saint is his duty. As thanks for the help with the documents, Jack decides to create a special transport for Chrome to the saint using spiritual magic. Jack spent too much energy on the teleportation and now feels exhausted. The saint was very far away, in the middle of nowhere. The teleportation was possible because Jack linked spirits to the saint to track her location. Suddenly, the spirits flee from the exhausted Jack. He is unable to catch them and cannot control his little friends. Crom chases after the spirits. He has seen something in the thicket of the forest. Jack is scared by his abruptness, but runs after him. Among the trees, Crom spots George II, who is about to murder the saint. He lunges at him, ready to strike him with his sword. If George hadn't let go of the saint, he would lose a hand. Rumors that Crom is now the saint's dog reached George's ears, so he is not surprised. But still, George did not expect Crom to attack him over the girl. He is disappointed in him. Crom is also not happy about the encounter, and George's behavior displeases him. He wants to know where George has been all these years. The man gives no concrete answer. He is lying. He says he has been sleeping the whole time. Crom bursts out shouting. He is very nervous. He believes George already knows that Liana has reincarnated in the saint's body, and that's why he tried to kill her. George well might have. Finally, Jack emerges exhausted from the forest. Everyone has left him alone in the forest. The boy is very unhappy, but all his feelings take a backseat when he sees a suspicious red-haired man in front of him, and Chrome, who furiously points his sword at him. Jack realizes the stranger is George II when he sees the little saint in Chrome's arms. The girl was attacked. It shows on her face. The man gets scared, can't stand it, and runs towards George to hit him. One must be crazy to dare to attack the saint. While Jack and George too argue hotly, the saint wakes up in Chrome's arms. She doesn't understand where she is or what is happening. Chrome's appearance bewilders her. George, meanwhile, notices the strangeness of the situation. Chrome has never behaved towards anyone as he does now towards the saint. The only person he adored was Liana. George never forgot the atmosphere of the interactions between them that he witnessed. Chrome and Liana spent a lot of time together. The girl used to get angry easily, and Chrome calmly calmed her down once. And again. And now he behaves the same, calming the saint, who in George's eyes resembles Liana too much in character. Suddenly, from the forest, the agitated voices of Maria and George are heard, looking for the saint. The loud noises coming from the forest frighten them. The girl was caught in a secret escape. Now they will scold her for causing trouble for the priests. Crone puts the frightened girl on the ground. Calamity mages must leave the girl alone, as Crone is on vacation. And Jack is known to everyone as the messenger from Runebelt. They shouldn't be here. The girl is afraid to be left alone with Jorg. But the mages promise to protect her from a distance. And Crone threatens Jorg with a beating if he attacks the saint. The behavior of the mages seems funny to the man. He chuckles, and Crom, along with Jack, head into the thicket of the forest, leaving the saint alone with Jorg. Jorg rants about Crom's character, detestable as always. The saint ignores his words. She is too furious. The girl is so angry that she starts threatening Jorg with defamation. She wants to lie to the priests and say he kidnapped her, because that way they won't scold her. Her actions and words do not match her young age. The girl has too calculating a mind. She reminds Jorg of an acquaintance of his. He remembers Liana. In the distant past, he approached the young woman to ask her for a job, and she called him lazy. Unable to find an occupation for himself, useless. Because of this, Liana gave Jorg the title of idler. And recalling this, Jorg realizes that the young woman's cunning nature has not changed at all. The man finally recognizes Liana in her new reincarnation. This greatly frightens the girl. She cannot understand how he could have guessed it. A furious Jorg and a frightened Maria appear from the forest. The boy is going to attack the second Jorg. He is sure that the man is guilty of the saint's disappearance. The girl sees this as an ideal opportunity to get rid of the second Jorg, and is going to defame the man, to say that he really kidnapped her. But George interrupts the saint, tells the story in his favor, lying that he tried to bring her home. But she was fleeing into the forest. Maria and George thank the man for his cooperation. They have no excuse for their negligence. They don't listen to the girl's justifications, as her previous brilliant escapes accuse her. The saint cannot refute it. Maria is very upset. The girl should not have caused trouble so far from the temple. But Maria cannot get too angry. She loves the saint and was happy to find her safe and sound. The rest doesn't matter. The saint is ashamed of her behavior, apologizes for worrying Maria, and they hug to reconcile. George deserves a reward for saving the saint, but he refuses it and asks the girl to give him a job. He lies, saying he only wants to repay the favor, but the saint knows his true identity and doesn't believe him. Early in the morning, the saint orders the man to catch as many as 100 fresh fish. Maria thinks the girl is exploiting him, but she disagrees. If he wants to repay the favor, he must work hard. She doesn't plan to forgive his insults. She doesn't want him to come close and demands that he not return until he has caught exactly 100 fish. She tries to intimidate Jorg, but he doesn't react as he should. He smiles foolishly and swears allegiance to the saint. The girl doesn't know what to answer. She starts to tremble. Jorg is astonished by the man's optimism. No one reacts to the saint's orders like that. The saint steps back, tries to get as far away as possible, and hides behind Jorg, who watches her actions with bewilderment. She asks the boy to follow Jorg as an observer. Other paladins can handle the bodyguard duty, but none of them will agree to watch the stranger. Only Jorg can do it. The man picks the boy up on his shoulders and drags him along. Jorg doesn't want to go with him, but the saint sees this as a way to reunite the Jorg family. The presence of George II irritates the saint. She is uneasy because in her previous life, he constantly confessed his love to her. Furthermore, since her arrival in Esplanade, everyone tries to pair the saint with Jorg by all means, which she finds unpleasant. The saint decides to investigate the reasons for this behavior later. Jorg's mother approaches her from behind. She asks the girl to follow her. All the saint's thoughts are now focused on gaining knowledge about forbidden magic. Several days have already passed since their arrival in the city, and the day has finally come when she can enter the Western Tower. The saint's lesson in the tower begins. They hand her a pile of thick books, which are a compilation of Saint Galatia's diaries. The girl has been reading these boring books for hours. The quantity is making her dizzy, but the priests only give her more and more. Mother Georga informs her that in this lesson in Galatia's diaries, information about forbidden magic will appear. This inspires the saint. However, this surprises the girl. Information about forbidden magic should not be in Galatia's diaries, since the mage Runnebolt created it, not the saint. Mother Georga says that exactly this will be the topic of her lesson. She is going to discuss with the girl the use of forbidden magic in the past. A long time ago, it was used by a person with bad intentions. A catastrophe began that could only be stopped by the alliance of Saint Galatia and Georga. Later, upon seeing this historical record, the previous Holy Father considered forbidden magic too dangerous and joined forces with Runnebolt to seal it. He feared the repeated use of this power, and the saint knew nothing about this. She didn't think forbidden magic was related to the temple, but to the master. This destroyed her. Liana always thought her master hid nothing from her, but it turns out he always lied to her. The saint was the only one unaware of such vital information. What good is her high rank if they tell her nothing? Now she must rethink the people she has encountered. Surely many knew the truth about forbidden magic and kept silent about it. With these thoughts, the first one that comes to her mind is George II, then the George family. If he knew anything, he would surely have told her. George II is the most loyal of all the calamities. The saint is sure of that. What she doesn't know is that, right now, that man is attacking George IV.